The dragon risen majestically to the middle kinga, approaching the city's suburbs and landing was not far. A young guy named Hadar sat on his powerful back. The creature returned to him his wise head and said that the academy was already nearby. And now the boy would have to get used to a new life among a constant human fuss. Hadar smiled and thoughtfully asked, "What are the incredible trials awaiting ahead?" Once upon a time, a boy who was barely turning for a few days left in the mountains, condemning to a faithful death. But he was lucky. He was sheltered by an ancient legendary dragon, with which he lived 12 years. The guy himself did not know what miracles he was destined to admire. As soon as the young man descends from the mountain, he is absorbed by the unseen darkness. Among all living things, only he has an incredible, overwhelming magical power. For centuries, the name of this creature has been horrified, because it is the most powerful of all that ever existed. An ancient dragon appears before us. The old dragon plunged into the boundless darkness of oblivion, and all its essence was only covered by fear. He could not realize that all this was happening to him. Why is his whole body so tremble? Does fear cut it so much? Faith faded. Only a young child stayed near him at the foot of the mountain. The dragon looked closely at the boy, and decided that he was a real human child before him. How did it happen that such a powerful magical energy is hidden in this tiny creature? He has lived for over 1,000 years, but has never faced the same. When the feeling of inevitable death becomes stronger, it remains only to be surprised. What to the hell is happening around? He sighed heavily and gently said that such an age, you would not do anything. Then, smiling, he added jokingly, "Old age sneaks. Time flies unnoticed, and now their own feelings sometimes betray. But now there is no place for unnecessary delay. Thanks to the unique magical abilities, people have been rare for centuries who had been honored to meet with dragons. If you perceive dragons as material beings, their differences mainly relate to the scale and capacity, not the essence. Instead, people are different. Their magical potential is manifested in a completely different way. In addition, the magical potential of this child is half of the previous indicator, and this is still much exceeding the power of the average dragon. In the future, this child will master the art of extremely powerful magic. Having mastered the supernatural power of the dragon, he will be able to use the magic of people without interruption. This will turn him into a real monster that will be difficult to cope with. This idea was so frightened by the dragon that he decided to get rid of the baby, at the same time sincerely asked not to conceal his anger. But at a moment when the dragon was brought with sharp claws, preparing to erase the baby from the face of the earth, the baby suddenly laughed, sincerely and carelessly. The dragon froze in the nostrils, not believing his own eyes. A tiny brawler protected before him. The boy gravely grabbed a huge claw with his little hands and, as if he found a new toy, began to lively with him. Stunned, the dragon remained a couple of mouth. He did not fit in his head that the baby really thinks that they were playing together. So the dragon exploded with a loud laughter and stated that everything became clear to him. In the end, he decided to take care of this child in person. Fortunately, children often look at their parents as an example to follow, especially when it comes to a way of education. If he really wants to become a monster, he cannot do without like-minded people. And it is also worth mentioning this guy. It's just empty dreams and imagination. But imagine if he could prolong his own life with magic. She dared to entrust her future to this child. For her, the boy became the last ray of faith, so she gave him the name Hadar, putting on him all his most secret dreams and hopes. That's the year. As if one was alarmed, there was no mention from that time. Now Hadar was in the cave of Sturgon, and gradually began to lose control over herself. Draft from his affairs, the dragon asked the human child if he was not concerned about her famine and what he could treat it. Suddenly remembering something essential, he instantly gained the appearance of a person. She, to the great surprise of the boy, dropped her dragon's likeness and appeared in front of him in the form of an ordinary woman. The woman took him in her arms, noting that the transformation into a man happened, and he turned out to be even younger than she expected. After that, she opened her breasts, inviting him to taste milk. Hadar greedily swallowed the drink, as if he had not tasted anything good eternity. The woman watched him closely at him, noticing how deftly he was drinking, as if he did not eat or drink for many days. In her look, a compassionate thought was read. He probably had to hungry well. In a moment, the guy stepped sideways, and it became clear from his expression, he was stronger and more cheerful. The woman smiled cheerfully and asked if he felt the forces returning to him. Suddenly, Hadar rapidly jumped and fell out of place, like a wind. The woman was stunned with this and, in surprise, wondered whether the baby could move with such franticity at all. She looked from the cave, watching carefully where the guy had just disappeared. The girl warned him in the whole voice, "If she runs so much ahead, be sure to cut into the first or better tree." But it did not restrain him. Hadar stopped literally the step before the collision with the trunk, and using magic, freely and confidently pulled the tree with the roots. The woman rushed to a danger, stunned by the imagination that it had torn from the ground. Despite all the circumstances, she undoubtedly calculated every detail. In the end, it is just as she thought. A few more years have passed, and Hadar has grown markedly. He has already turned 4. Together with their mother, they settled on the grass in the middle of a cozy clearing. There, the woman gently explained her son that breastfeeding would no longer need. Hadar has proudly agreed. Now he is already enough adult. The woman had fun with him and wondered if he really did not want to try another one more. Last time. Hadar stopped his cheeks with a blush, and referring to her as a mother, he replied that there was no need. He is now interested in new experience and knowledge. The woman just smiled and noted that there were many more trials ahead. What about the use of magic? The mention of Hadar immediately illuminated her. His eyes literally flashed admiration, wasn't it? He rushed to his mother rapidly, passionately stating that he seeks to master her art. The woman, smiling, clarified whether she was referring to her ability to exhale the flames or something no less exciting, but when she softened her voice, she explained that it was too early for him. Hadar asked why he has not yet been allowed. The woman noted that he may really understand the creation of magical circles, but even dragon masters need 2 years of hard work to master this sophisticated technique. But Hadar was not going to retreat. He confidently stated that if you do not risk or check, you will not know if it is really possible. The woman looked at her son, thinking about what man he became. The feeling of impotence stole into her soul, but she gathered with his forces, deciding to share with him the most valuable life knowledge. Adara, overcrowded by joy, was eagerly tuned to listen to maternal guidelines. The woman took advantage of her magical power and explained, "It is because of this magical circle that you can cause the dragon's breathing. All you need to do is imagine this circle mentally, focus in the right direction, and then witchcraft is activated by itself. You should not spend balls on the ground. It is better to lift the shots into the sky." The woman in the imagination playfully drew. If she possessed a force similar to Hadar, then she could blow the earthly hardship. Hadar answered her with a smile. They say, he understood everything. After that, the young man firmly closed the eyelids and plunged into the depths of the concentration. He realized that he should have a flow. It was at this moment that the same picture that his mother once showed him. The woman could not hide her astonishment. Soon the guy mastered this incomprehensible force. The woman, amazed to the depths of her soul, ordered him to direct her abilities into the sky. Hadar has finally exhaled the flames of the dragon. She couldn't believe her eyes. Did he cope with this for the first time? What really happens here? His strength seemed fantastic. Even for her, despite all her exceptional talents, it was almost impossible to overcome this test for the first time. What an incredible power lies in this tiny man, and what a strong strength of his charisma is incomprehensible. Since then, Hadar has received invaluable advice and support from his mother. Every day he honored his new skill, finding a special joy in this. The workout turned for him into a fascinating game that gave unspeakable pleasure. Once, without restraint, but the young man was not going to stop there. He plunged into training, full of determination. One day, a woman entered the room and asked what he was busy. Hadar answered her with a gentle smile that mastered the intricacies of her magical grimoire. Moreover, he deeply mastered many magical secrets. Hadar used to create a perfect copy of a woman with the help of magic. Amazed, she wondered if she was really sand. His abilities seemed truly supernatural. So, 6 years old. Hadar has already celebrated his decade. It was on this special day that a woman opened a new magical spell before him. Hadar watched his every movement carefully, and did not resist the question of what kind of strength. The woman explained that this magic is so powerful that even she cannot fully conquer her. It is the final spell, the only circle that it dared to teach it. It is a spell that can give a continuation of life, and she dreamed fervently to use it to her. The frightened Hadar did not resist and asked, "Did she really decide to leave this world?" Ms. confidently noted that she is only 477 years old, and for her it is a little thing. In fact, she's still quite young as a 5-year-old child among people. Smiling, he decided that he could stop there. But he promised, if she asked, he would do it without hesitation. It was a great happy woman, and soon Hadar tested his freshly mastered spells. They were reminiscent of magic, which was already known to him as a way of extending his life. The woman with relief noted that she was experiencing incredible lightness. Finally, she met exactly the man who had so long hoped for her life. Will he be able to decide again? He is simply obliged to try again. Hadar said with a smile that it was wonderful. Soon they got exhausted so much that they just lay on the ground, barely breathing. The woman sighed lightly, glad that she would now be able to live for another 10,000 years. Hadar radiated absolute pleasure and sincerely thanked her for it. The woman gently hugged him, noting that he grew up surprisingly rapidly. It seemed as if he were little and sincerely charming yesterday, and now she would reveal the secrets of difficult to squeeze. A real hero. Hadar smiled embarrassed and added that there were many more calls in front of him. In addition, the title of rescuer suits her more. In these words, the woman threw a surprised, slightly interested look. Hadar shared his memory how clearly heard the events that unfolded in the mountains. At that time, all the adults called him in the other. In their eyes, a true horror was read. In Japanese, iniko means baby dream. Did ARC confess that it is only because of his mother who then saved him? He is still alive, and it is she who is his real lifeguard? The woman smiled gently, and calling him her dear boy, advised her to get to her mother. She pressed him so firmly that he felt his breath. The ADR complained quietly that it was hurt. It seemed as if she wanted to strangle him. It passed for a while, and Hadar went outside to meet his mother again. He was already 12. He wondered if I did not want to know when my mom returned home. Hadar believes that he can continue to do his usual affairs, patiently waiting for her arrival. Meanwhile, the woman wandered among the trees, thinking what the Hadar did until she is not around. In her imagination, she has already seen him in a madness, rushed to her. His voice would tremble from excitement. They say, it was not for 3 days, and he gave it every moment. Where did it go? Which woman thinks like this? The answer was obvious. She returned and insisted that she had not left the house all this time. I was amazed at the depths of my soul. Hadar gave up training again. This time, he used the spell of the dragon flame. The woman froze, stunned by the unexpected, and the next moment the powerful wave of magic rejected her to the ground. Concerned, she, raising, cast a confused gaze around and asked what had happened at all. The guy only now felt her presence and said in surprise that she had already returned. The woman wondered what he was doing. Hadar Prudko approached her and explained that he was engaged in witchcraft, trying to teach the dragon to master his own breath and fire. In his opinion, this exercise helps to focus. He suggested trying to perform it together. However, the woman just sighed and admitted that even for her this task is too difficult. The guy looked over his shoulder and noticed a piece of paper scattered everywhere. Those who brought him his mother. He began to hesitate whether he inadvertently made it here. The woman, carefully looking at the room, noted that she was her own documents. The young man was vigorously undertaken to help her with papers until his gaze lingered on one document. The woman smiled gently and reminded that at one time, he told of a dream to go on a journey and discover new horizons. There is only a month to prepare ahead, and then the long-awaited exam. In order to become a student of the Royal Academy of Magic, he needs to work more hard without sparing efforts and devote all this time to diligent learning. The Had, barely noticeably smiling, shared that when he turned 12, he intends to enter the academy. The woman supported him, they say, understands that sooner or later he would have to leave the mountain and learn to find common ground with other people. The guy was a little concerned that he had not yet prepared for such changes. Will he have difficulties? However, the mother is gently assured. There are no reasons for excitement. If this year he fails the exam, then others will not have a chance. Here's a copy of the samples he may need. Hadar took the textbook and wondered where such confidence came from. He sighed heavily and later acknowledged that he did not see for himself a different way, but to give all his strength. Hardly crossing the threshold of his room, he quickly took up the books and plunged with his head into training. Taking a textbook, the guy dared to take a test, and the reaction did not slow down. The surprise was written on his face. He froze in place, deciding that it was a kind of check. Among the tasks, there were topics from books that the mother persistently forced him to study, and sometimes even more complex issues than those facing him now. Therefore, he will undoubtedly easily cope with this task. The woman who watched him from a certain distance reflected, "He has already overcome a lot of difficulties in her way. To admire how he overcomes these obstacles is real pleasure." But at once she was anxious. If Hadar becomes a student of the academy, she will get rid of the opportunity to see daily how he grows. All you have to do is wait for rare meetings on vacations. She broke into his room and ordered sharply, "Stop and give me this book immediately. Like, this is a solid delusion, and therefore you should burn it and finally go to bed." However, Hadar just shook his head. "Like, I will give you anything." The Woma, high above the Royal Academy of Magic Zelgeos, a woman again accepted the terrifying likeness of the dragon to inspire the horror of the inhabitants of this magical institution. However, she soon stopped, realizing that it was the limit where her forces could bring her. As soon as people meet with a dragon, a panic will break immediately. Hadar recalled as he once used the magic of the flight, quietly sank to the ground and heard from a woman an alarming warning. "Be careful." Convincing everyone that he was not threatened, Hadar jumped skillfully from his mother's shoulder. In the end, he carefully stepped on the ground and, engulfed in curiosity, began to study every corner of the academy carefully. His eyes flashed with fire. He faced the true essence of the Royal Academy Zelgeus. It is here that he should start with a blank sheet. However, the anxiety again made herself known. The guy confessed that he was still worried about whether he would be able to pass today's test. Stopping at the gate, he looked at everything around and asked what was happening here, and where the action was going on. He was also interested in whether he had the right to come here without official permission. If he goes here, the troubles will not be avoided. How then will he look in the eye of his mother? He even mentally portrayed how he would be boiled. Lee mentors could accuse him of invasion of another's space. This is, they say, a characteristic of only scoundrels who are not a place in the walls of the academy. From these thoughts, the guy's nerves have only tight. He noted that he would be torn into pieces, like an old water heater. But where else does he go? Suddenly, a girl approached him from behind and wondered if something had happened to him. Hadar explained that he had come to find a stable registration for the exam. But she had disappeared mysteriously, as if it had dissolved in the air. The girl continued to look at him with surprise, and convincingly noted that there was never such a rack here, and could not be. In response, Hadar only threw a multifaceted full look. The girl explained to him that he was at the entrance, and the registration is on the main. Hadar wondered if he could go inside without any obstacles. The girl lifted her eyebrows in surprise and replied, "Why not?" Hadar was confused and did not find what to say. However, the girl seems to have already understood everything and wondered whether he arrived from distant places. Hadar trembled, hearing it, and she only confirmed her guesses with a smile. The young man hastened to explain that he is from a mountainous place, so everything looks unusual and unknown here for him. The girl willingly announced to hold Hadar in this territory. He was gratefully grateful for such support, because it became much easier thanks to her task. They soon approached the registration rack. The girl asked if she means that they would now become first-grade students. Hadar noticed that their examination numbers differ by only one digit. She smiled cheerfully and said it was probably a sign of fate. After this short conversation, they went to the audience A, where the exam was to take place. The first stage of the test was completed. All who successfully passed him gathered in the audience and dispersed in places. The teacher greeted them on this achievement and announced the start of the written part of the exam. After that, he asked the students to transfer their notebooks to those who sat behind. The girl handed over to Hadar, and he barely audible thanks for her readiness to show everything. Her smile remained friendly, and she gently noted that in the world it is always worth reaching for help to those who need it, right? They had to put on the full. The young man looked closely at her, covered with a blush, and whispered quietly, "Yes." Once the first test was completed, the teacher immediately announced the written exam. The girl cried to the audience, watching the door that began the testing. She kept her breath, waiting for someone to come out. Hadar just appeared. She did not stay immediately, and wondered how he managed to pass the trial. Hadar confessed that he was experiencing slight excitement, although it is quite logical. The girl nodded in response, noting that such anxiety is quite normal, because the local atmosphere is fundamentally different from the usual home. Hadar stressed that most questions were reminiscent of those that often happen on all 6 items. Suddenly the girl frozen in place. She strongly hit the table on the table and strictly ordered him to stop. For the exam, it was enough to make 2 compulsory items and 2 more, at your own choice of 4 possible ones. Together, there are only 4 disciplines. So why did he decide to take all 6? Hadar smiled noticeably, confessing that he is holding tension now. He does not want to be mistaken, so he prefers to be safe. The girl watched him with surprise, thinking that he, the little one, was creating unnecessary difficulties. In fact, there was nothing complicated about this. Hadar stressed with excitement that he used to check his own decisions almost 5 times in a row, too meticulously treating details. The girl mentally agreed. She also wants to apologize twice, but the minutes are relentlessly pouring. She recalled, some of the students have already coped with this exam. The teacher responsible for the testing has just completed the work of one of them and called for the next. Hadar wondered, what are the rules of evaluation here? The girl, barely hiding the disappointment, replied that to argue and prove something in vain. Everything here happens in completely different principles. During this exam, the participants had to go through several fencing sites. It seems that everyone received their area according to the room. The girl confidently moved to her sector. This meant that their next meeting was inevitable and would happen very soon. Hadar nodded silently and also headed on his site, where a new test was already waiting for him. A young man stood in front of Hadar with his sword, even before the battle, thanking. It was a lot of puzzled by Hadara. He stared at the guy, trying to understand whether he really carried a real weapon with him. He looked at classmates and noted that not only he was in a similar position, did everyone really bring swords with them? And he felt absolutely not prepared for it. He has nothing needed with him, and in a moment the exam will begin. In his thoughts he again draws a picture, as a teacher formally reproaches him, insisting, the sword must be with him. Like people without proper equipment at the academy to nothing. There is no place for such losers. At this point, the teacher announced the next soldier and invited him to enter the ring. Hadar, without coping with the fated feelings, dropped on his knees and shouted despair that everything was finished for him. Noticing the student's condition, the mentor was worried about what had happened. Suddenly, Hadnar recalled that he had forgotten his sword. However, the teacher immediately reassured him. They say, it is a little thing that is easy to forgive. The teacher, although he felt the excitement, still assured the boy, it is not necessary to worry so, because for the exam everything was already prepared and the weapons were also provided. Let it just come to that rack and choose any one. Hadar exhaled a little lightly and agreed. This option came up. Going to the shelf, he saw a whole bunch of broken swords. The young man noted that others were able to cope with training only through support. Do all the swords in this place have such properties? Then the guy again asked his mentor to ask whether it was allowed to expose the sword himself, which would meet all his requirements. There were no weapons capable of helping him in battle. The teacher looked at the student with surprise without taking his eyes. In the end, he exhaled and said that it did not contradict the rules, so what was he thanked for him? The teacher was convinced that a guy of those who skillfully find the holes in the rules and skillfully uses them in his own benefit, isn't he? And yet, even if it once occurs, it will be not easy to blame him. Hadar smiled, and having rejoiced the obtained permission, strongly announced his intention to evoke the exclusively powerful sword. To do this, he had to combine 2 key forces. He used the spell that his mother taught. From this, the teacher became silent with fear. It was the element of air, the real magic of the wind. It is incredible. It's hard to imagine that all this is really happening. Soon, Hadar herself with his own sword. The teacher froze with surprise, not believing his own eyes. Is he really capable of this? Maybe he just dreams of all this in an unusual dream? Is it just a fiction of his imagination? Hadar looked at his sword carefully and noted. A balanced weight and reliable strength made this weapon really exceptional. The teacher openly acknowledged that he had no imagination that just happened. However, he stated that he was ready for it, wasn't it? In this case, they can start their fight. Hadar accepted the call. Immediately later, he rushed ahead on the offensive, ahead of the enemy for a moment, and even having time to think. The teacher cleverly avoided the blow, immediately noticing the perfect accuracy and lightning of the attacker's movements. His abilities were amazed. It became obvious that this student was not at all like others. The examiner suddenly emerged behind the boy's back and asked, "What happens if he applies all his power in battle?" For the young man, this attack did not have any difficulty. He easily repelled it. It was at this moment when she completed the exam. The girl thought out how rapidly the stage flashed. Not as she imagined before. She inadvertently remembered Hadar and thought about whether he had everything just as well. He put all his strength in persistent workouts. Maybe he was so fervently prompted by some special goal. It was at that moment that she approached the ring where Hadari had to take place. However, what opened her eyes was a complete surprise. The teacher did not hold his tears, seeing his sword destroyed in a fierce fight. Hadar sincerely apologized, assured that he did his best to avoid such a result. The girl was scratched, seemed to be surprised and sadness at the same time. She approached Hadar and asked what happened. He calmly explained that they with the examiner agreed in the duel, and the enemy failed to overcome his power. The girl seemed to watch everything on the side, as if the events were happening without her participation. She turned to the boy with interest, asking what was wrong with his sword. Hadar faded his eyebrows gloomily and replied that he was evoking this weapon by using alchemy. According to him, the sword is quite ordinary, and is not different. Then the girl asked if he really killed him, and asked with care, could she look at the weapon? Hadar confidently gave her his sword, accompanying this gesture with indisputable words. However, the girl was unable to even keep the sword. The weight was too big, and she confessed to this as soon as the weapon slipped out of her hands. After a vain attempt, she fell with the sword of the bottom. Harad only responded calmly to the situation, noting that it was quite expected. The girl could not hide the surprise. It was an incomprehensible weapon. She wondered, what did he create it? Hadar effortlessly lifted his sword, immediately recognizing in his brilliance the combination of the reconciliation and adamant. It was from this high alloy that he was released. Amazed to the heart, the girl could not find a single word to express her opinion. Hadar, meanwhile, calmly explained, thanks to the alchemical transmutation, he was able to create a compound from the air. Theoretically, this should be the most strongest of the possible combinations of elements. She did not even try to delve into these complex explanations, and frankly admitted that she did not understand anything. Does he really need training at this academy? It was at this moment that the examiner finally recovered and exclaimed with surprise, what is this guy allowing himself? After all, a sword made of purest steel and the strongest alloys. So he managed to create it with ease. Even the sword, extinguished by the master of his craft, could not stand a powerful blow and flew into pieces. He felt a bad disappointment because his favorite weapon broke so unexpectedly. This made him think, how can one blade destroy the other? Hadar noted that if you look closely, the proportion of adamanta is about 15, and the material itself has a weight of about 300 grams. This is 15 times harder than gold. The examiner thoughtfully emphasized, if really so, the mass of the sword will be. Hadar in his thoughts weighed and clarified whether it was about 65 kilograms. The examiner, along with the girl, slightly sorting from Hadar, carefully warned him. They say, it is better not to wave so, and then you will leave everyone without a head. The examiner assured that Hadar successfully coped with the task, and allowed to prepare for the next test. Adra seems to be a little ashamed and carefully suggested to hold a reclake match, if allowed at all. However, the expert immediately rejected the idea, stating categorically, there will be no second match. Obviously, he simply does not have such an opportunity. So the moment came to leave this place. And finally, the long-awaited break for lunch came. Hadar and that girl decided to spend this time together. Amazed by the incredible atmosphere of the Royal Academy of Magic Fowl, she shared her feelings. The girl confessed that she could not believe in the reality of events, because she is now in a place that has always caused her sincere admiration. Isn't that a dream? The girl emphasized that the Historical Academy is taught by the most prominent specialists, and its graduates gain significant achievements both in the scientific field and in public life. If she took the exam, will she finally come to life? However, Hadar seems to have not reacted to her words, because after his second trial, he still remained stunned. The girl assured that everything is well with her. To be honest, he can only defeat the examiner himself, and it really captures. In response, Hadar noted that he was well aware of it, but reminded that the main idea of this test is not in victory. Will they not expel him now? He did not want to disgrace his dignity. Its results looked as much as possible. The girls sought to cheer him up. They say nothing bad happened, because soon he would have another opportunity to express himself. Hadar took up the sandwich to support, and with interest asked if the next test would concern magic. The girl nodded in response, noting that there are two separate ways of testing knowledge. Hadar noted that the ability to kiss the target is a real exam for magical skill in creating objects. This is, in fact, a special form of creativity, isn't it? The girl nodded, agreeing. Everything is. She had no doubt about taking an attack on attacking magic, but did not stop preparing hard. Hadar advised him to test himself at the creative stage, although he did not consider himself a connoisseur in making magical attributes. The girl again remembered the sword created by him, and was forced to admit that he was right. Is he really not interested in additional points for creativity? Hadar confidently stated that he would not waste the chance to use this opportunity for all 100. The girl doubted his intentions, and carefully wondered if he was sure of her decision. Hadar was genuinely surprised by this issue and asked where she had doubts. The girl noted that, of course, the score system is a really good thing, but the final solution remains the examiner, and he can deliberately lower the result at any time. Nevertheless, Hadar did not embarrass it at all. He stated that, no matter what, he was confident in his choice and should use his chance. Trying not to exacerbate the dispute, the girl only said, "If he has already made a decision, then she will not be reordered. But let him not bend the stick, okay?" Hadar shuddered, and promised that this time everything would be different. At this point, their roads diverged for a while. The girl noted that he still did not know what his name is. Her name was Cecilia, and she was incredibly pleased to spend an unforgettable, full time full of joy. The young man also called his name Hadar, and warmly thanked her for his care. Cecilia confessed that she sincerely hoped they would be able to stay in the first class. Hadar wondered what with classmates. Does she really believe that everyone would take this exam? I sighed with despair, noticing that his pessimism again makes himself known. Then it was time for the third test. The teacher called all the students to the audience and reported that they were waiting for the magical art exam. The hall in which they found themselves served as a workshop for the creation of enchanting artifacts. This year only a few gathered here. Why are so little so much? Why? However, it was a great prospect of meeting even more potential participants. He even prudently prepared for them all kinds of charms in the form of additional points. What results did he seek? Hadar watched the examiner with surprise, trying to understand whether these bonuses are only a way of interest in whether they are a little deeper. Finally, the examiner recovered and proposed to explain in detail all the features of this test. They have only 1 hour to complete the task. Participants are the magic stones, from which they have to create a magical artifact. All the other materials you need will appear at the end of the lesson. Be sure to use them and not hesitate to get into your work. Hadar delved into his thoughts and came to the conclusion. These stones are far from perfect, but they can be dealt with. His imagination has already scroized whether he was able to create a perfect magic artifact that would be the best among all possible. Perhaps such a skill will bring him not only the highest appreciation, but also a pleasant bonus in the form of additional points. It will not be easy to correct the shortcomings that were manifested during the fencing exam, a real test. However, hope does not go away, and he firmly believes in his own victory. So, a bright and carefree student time awaits him ahead. We will overcome this exam without a doubt. It was then that the examiner solemnly announced, the test began. The next day the teacher responsible for the fencing exam asked the girl whether she was confident in identifying the culprit. She confidently replied that she clearly remembers his appearance. Meanwhile, 2 other educators were fascinated by their impressions of Hadar. The man shared that in a written exam, where at least 65% had to be recruited to pass, he managed to win the highest scores of all 4 compulsory disciplines. In addition, he at his own request made 2 more additional items and also achieved the maximum result. The girl noticed how in the fencing exam he simply created an alchemical sword from the mixture of auricum and adamanta and easily, as if playing, wielding it with one hand. Is he really a man? Suddenly, an examiner who was responsible for the previous exam entered the staff room and asked the audience to listen carefully to his words. He kept a job done by the student at yesterday's exam and noted that it was one of the candidates who passed the exam. A device capable of managing gravity. It is difficult to believe, however. For a long time, he believed that this is only on paper, in bold scientific hypotheses. Two other examiners glanced at the mysterious device and immediately realized that only the teenager could create it. The last examiner noted that he is encouraged to give this boy more creative points than the introduced. Maybe so it will be, is it? Meanwhile, fencing mentors stressed that it could confidently calculate at least 10,000 points. Of course, they are a truly unique candidate. And for the first time in the history of the Academy, one of the contenders has received a record high grade. Thanks to these striking results, Hadar made the test brilliant. However, he does not know this yet. During the fast, the guy tortured himself in vain, although this story deserves a separate story. After the exams, returning to his mother, the young man with anxiety expected the results. He closed in his room and 2 days have passed since the results have been announced. The Royal Academy's dining room again raged the usual revival. Herod had just finished dinner and started looking for a corner where you could sit and rest. Looking at the hall, he noticed that there was almost no one around. Aren't these young men recently become our students? However, it is even good, he thought. At the same time, he did not even notice how another student was moving towards, so their unexpected meeting turned into a sudden collision. Among the students was Cecilia. It was he who first met her during the exam. Their meeting took place in a warm atmosphere. They gladly recognized each other and, having exchanged smiles, placed together at the table. Hadar wondered if I also passed the exam. I smiled with my heart and assured that I was no different from him. And then she turned to him with respect, calling Hadar student and using the official you. Hadar lifted her gaze in surprise, asking why she is so respectful to him. Cecilia replied that there is simply no different option here. It belongs to the top 3 of the most outstanding this year. His achievements are really striking. He took first place and scored points. Hearing this, the Gerard felt the excitement again and asked why it looked so special. Let him return to him the session with which he passed the entrance exams. The girl barely restrained laughter, and then apologized, explaining that she just wanted to tease him a little. The offended pride of the boy made himself known. He turned away and muttered something sharp under his nose. It was then that his eyes fell on the stand hung on the wall. There was an appeal to all students of the Academy, calling for the highest level of architectural skills. Bamboo construction was invited for one-day internship. Garrett remembered how his mother told him about one special thing. Cecilia broke away from food and looked at him closely. In her eyes she had curiosity. In his thoughts, Garrett heard his mother's guidance again. Even during his studies on his way, Gakuchik will happen. He will need all his strength if he really seeks great accomplishments. Herod convinced that it is worth trying everything, because it opens the path to the future. Cecilia smiled at this and threw the phrase, "His mother is probably an exceptional woman, isn't he?" Herod, without hesitation, confirmed, "Yes, of course. It is incomparable. The best in the world is not found." Cecilia nodded as a sign of consent, because without a doubt, she perfectly understood her. The girl thought that he equally appreciated both parents, but could not but pay attention to the fact that he was treated with a special piety. Herod sincerely admitted that even in his thoughts, he did not see himself at the office table. Then Cecilia looked at the same chair and asked what to do to finally apply. Hardly hearing these words, Herod strongly grabbed from the place and declared loudly that his decision was already final. He still decided to try to apply. Although he has no experience in this field, he is set to do his best to win. Cecilia did not refrain from another joke and advised him to stay away from all strange tricks. About their previous adventure on the exam is still going out gossip. Garado tiredly asked her to finally stop reminding of that adventure. Meanwhile, a girl with gorgeous long blonde hair flashed behind. She was noticed by Herod. Turning, he met her look. She stopped at once, without taking his eyes at his eyes. Herod was confused for a moment, suspecting that she was watching him. How incredible she is. However, in a moment, the girl turned away and disappeared from the dining room. Harad smiled and said, "Funny. It was too loud, eh?" At that moment, I could no longer deceive myself. Cecilia was illuminated. She understood something essential about her own nature, and unexpectedly thought, maybe that kind of emotional and charismatic girls like Harada. Just 5 days passed, and contrary to all expectations, Hiratsu received the long-awaited consent for internships. He was embarrassed by joyful anticipation. He went to the central office of Bambuk. Herod did not hide his delight when he said that his name was Herod, and next month he would officially become a student of the Royal Academy of Magic Zelgius. Once, walking on the campus, he noticed an advertisement on the wall to their company. He was interested in the corporate philosophy of this team, so he filed his application without hesitation. Thanked them all over the heart for accepting it. The person who received your message emphasized how significant and meaningful these words were. After that, they walked among the audience, giving all the postcards. They were warned that everyone would receive several documents that will need to be carefully read. After reading the materials, everyone should take up practical tasks, so it is important to adjust, concentrate, and be as careful as possible. Herod looked at these materials closely and emphasized that the base of the first floor should be marked by special strength and stability. To this end, there are traditionally used mithril alloy with adamant. Instead, it is important for the upper tiers to maintain the balance between strength and lightness, so they are usually made of a combination of steel and mithril. After reading these papers, Harad thought thoughtfully. A riki made of ray adamantine alloy is stored on the first floor. Obviously, on the higher floors, the use of mithril and adamanta, because, suddenly, a man approached him and interrupted, noting that doubts about the written is good. Such criticality indicates a serious, responsible attitude to one's own learning. The student from Zelgius was no wonder. The girl ran up rapidly, and holding her breath wondered, "Who is President Wright, and what does he do here?" President Wright said with a smile that he had come to this place for the internship. He added that it would be unclear to lose the opportunity to get acquainted with everyone closer. As for his recent words, let him look carefully at the next page. Any project is impossible without the budget. In other words, the funds for implementation are always determined in advance. He probably is well aware that adamant is a rare metal with a high cost. Due to financial restrictions, their team simply cannot afford it. Harad watched the president closely, hoping to hear his reaction. Yes, if it is impossible to make adamant in the usual way, then it will take a little time. President Wright looked at the young man with a genuine surprise and wondered what he was referring to and what his intentions were building. After that, Herod resorted to his magic, and in the eyes of the president showed incredible firmness, similar to pure adamant. He confirmed this information without any hesitation. This news was shocked by President Wright. She was stunned to the very depths of her soul and exclaimed, "What the hell is taken away? Here's..." Herod emphasized that under other conditions, they will probably need more resources, but the costs will almost be reduced to zero. In these words, President Wright just laughed, emphasizing that it sounds like a real joke. He still cannot tread how adamant can form so elementary. Only by touching did he manage to see his authenticity. When he took the material in his hands, he could not hide surprise and delight. He was in front of him a real adamantine alloy. How can it be? Is he really so skillful in magic? Harad shouted in surprise, though he had doubts about it. There was a real miracle at the atomic level. He literally awoke the alloy from the void. President Wright was so impressed that he could not hide the surprise and immediately asked how it was possible. So it turns out that they are really able to get these resources from nothing, as if pulling them out of the air? Harad nodded calmly, confirming everything. The president, having grabbed his head, enthusiastically proclaimed, "This technology will radically change our idea of the world of construction. What is his name?" The boy called his name, Harad, the man in response to the joy of acquaintance. He then suggested that the current internship had no room at all. Yes, we are talking about special abilities. However, they have nothing to do with. All they need is a chance to expand the business with its help. Perhaps it is worth discussing the details during a personal meeting. For Karat, this was a real surprise, but somewhere at a subconscious level, he immediately admitted everything was quite predictable. President Wright made it clear to him that he would not give up further actions because he does not intend to lose this opportunity. So, the moment has come to the warehouse. Harriet, with sadness, realized that he was not left choosing to choose. He followed the President Wright. Her laboratory inspected the surrounding space, clearly demonstrating how much everything was equipped with a scope. After all, what else to expect from the leading construction corporation of the kingdom? At this point, the president came up with a serious question. He was interested in what amount of such an alloy he was able to produce. The young man thought a little, pretending that there could be about 1,000 carts. The man lifted his eyebrows with surprise and asked, 1,000? Sounds quite real. Such a reaction of the Harade was unexpected for him, but he saw nothing wrong with it. President Wright smiled kindly as a sign of consent. He interpreted everything correctly and was fully trusted by the young man. The guy was surprised by such trust and wondered if he really had to prove or persuade him. He himself could not believe how much a giant visa invented his imagination. President Wright suggested that immediately move to the main. They will need about 250 tons of this alloy, and the total need is 750 tons. Harriet sighed lightly, realizing that the volumes were not so large. The man specified if he really agrees in the amount of 3.7 billion cucumbers, isn't it? The cherry was surprised, so I asked the president if he really deserved this generous reward. The guy was convinced that he had mastered this art, playing with his own mother. However, President Wright emphasized that his talent is much more valuable than he imagines himself. Garad noted that he was now ready for start, and the president emphasized that he puts great hopes on him. Soon Harriet managed to collect a huge pile of this material without difficulty. President Wright was so impressed that he barely recognized himself. He glared with his mouth wide open and exclaimed in surprise, "This is yes. Is it possible?" The president, without a moment, rushed to the goal, shouting the boy on the move for him to stay and wait for him here. The girls rose with surprise to follow how the president disappears from sight, and calmly assured that there is nothing to worry about. President Wright rapidly raced the corridor until he faced the staff. One of them warned him so that he was not in a hurry in office. Responding, Wright apologized, adding that he was in a hurry. Then, another employee noted that because of this fussy, Wright accidentally poured him coffee with coffee. The president has sincerely apologized and promised to buy a new suit for the choice of the victim. Harriet stood immobily on his own, looking patiently, listening carefully to the screams that were spreading from all sides. Shortly after that, President Wright entered, holding some mysterious suitcase. He looked extremely exhausted, so much that he dropped on the floor. Harriet, frightened by this condition, hurried to ask whether it was all right with him. Wright put a suitcase with him and, breathing hard, apologized for the delay. Harata tried to cheer him up, assuring that nothing wrong had happened. Then the man opened his suitcase, where a lot of gold shone brightly, and proudly announced that it was his well-deserved award for all the difficult expedition. 3.7 billion silver coins were exchanged for gold. Harriet did not resist the remark. In fact, there are many here. President Wright apologized to him, explaining that the limited budget allows you to allocate only that amount, and expressed his hope for understanding. The garage immediately removed all the gold coins, and a smile blossomed again on his face. Noticing his mood, the president concluded that the garage was satisfied. As the head of a large-scale corporation, Wright always monitors his decisions. The man warmly patted the guy on his shoulder, promising to think about how you can fix the situation. He would thank you sincerely if he got a little more time. Harriet was genuinely surprised and suggested that their devotion would bring them a new award. Turning to the president, he noted that it is probably extremely difficult. The president noted that large companies are higher, but the burden of experiences and responsibility is increasing. In his hands, the fate of all workers and their families. Harad thought about the presidential words and realized that his family was above all. He remembered his mother and unexpectedly thought out who she was in that alien and far world. In the end, he returned his thoughts with President Wright, acknowledging that he was indeed an outstanding leader in business. Inside, doubts were fighting. Would he ever look like a Wright himself? To this the president replied frankly, he sought to reach such a level all his life. Talent is a true human capital. It is people who are the main wealth of any company. At the same time, two strangers flew into the room. Unburned dislike was read in their views. They did not take their eyes from Garada, as if they had already thought of how to do him. Feeling these hostile glances, the garages immediately became alert. President Wright asked strangers to ask them here. He frankly apologized, but stressed that staying in this place was forbidden. One of the guests approached him, complaining about a shrill cold, and insisted they need to talk to the president alone. Wright stood sharply, throwing away, "How did they daze? What are their intentions?" The young man smiled and noted that to waste the forces for the sake of scanty earnings is a complete nonsense. In the meantime, the girl got an ad, which in fact brought Garada here, and added that they also came across an internship proposal. It was at this moment that they were suddenly a great idea. All you have to do is steal it, as a solid ransom is at stake. This thought was missing in his head. Two students rushed to the president of Wright. He immediately rushed, hesitated how to respond to a sudden attack, and here, Harad hurriedly, activating the reaction of atomic transformation. Just in the eyes of everyone appeared a powerful wall of Kojite, an inviolable diamond fortress, into which both students crashed at full speed. The abduction girl crashed into the wall and fell to the ground with a deaf moan. The guy, looking around, immediately urged her to get up. Meanwhile, Herod carefully added that he was barely given to the language, because he was not injured from a blow against the wall. Then the young man himself removed the protective shell from his heart, and frankly confessed, "President Wright shows genuine care and kindness to his colleagues, so he respects him deeply. Even the most expensive diamond merchants before the president gives his subordinates." He was already tuned to the battle with opponents, and this inner readiness gave him an advantage. Immediately after these words, the guy tightened. He suddenly realized that he was not destined to leave without a fight. Shortly after the horror, he fainted. Only after that, Herod finally was able to relieve his breath. He turned to the president and asked if the harm was caused. President Wright replied that he was all right with him, and thanked her sincerely for his care. He watched this young man, feeling that he was understood not only on alchemy. The guy's fighting skill was amazed. What other riddles does this unpredictable person hide? At this point, staff are on the scene of the events. Having made their way to the warehouse, they reported that the security service had already arrived. "What is here for a noise?" the question came. President Wright just shrugged. "They say, nothing serious, ordinary little thing. Let them think that this young man has decided for them." The month later, Harad with Cecilia was in one class, among the first graders. In the first lesson, the teacher sincerely congratulated the students, glad that they joined the school community. Cecilia and Garad got to Class A. During the break, the girl approached the boy and asked with a smile if they would really study together. Her face shone with happiness as she saw him again. Herod nodded and replied confidently, "Yes." Cecilia wondered how he had an internship and whether some misses happened. On this, Harad, markedly shooting, shared the news. He was already offered a place at work. The girl was struck by this news, although deep in her heart she realized that there was nothing unexpected here. It is not surprising that he was entrusted with such an opportunity. Harad seemed to slightly waved. "They say, it is only good luck, a happy coincidence." Cecilia stressed that given his special student status, this would not be ignored. Herod ironically noted that she returned to this topic again. The guy, looking thoughtfully at the window, thought he would actually work here, on this earth. He seems to stand on that lonely road without any way out. All this time, his world was only mountains, but now it is waiting for him quite another. A new beginning with the boys at the academy. He really wants to hope that he will be able to establish a relationship with them and become part of their company. It was at this moment that a student approached them, addressed Harad, and wondered if he was not the same famous student. Harad looked at a stranger in surprise and, after a short pause, confirmed. "It seems, in fact, it is about him." Smiling widely, he turned to the boy, gladly emphasizing how good he came. His presence was really necessary for an important business, which would not be done without him. Herod was frankly annoyed, thinking whether he really had to make efforts to please someone strangers. Herod, full of anxiety, stared at the mysterious stranger, and was inquirily asked what had happened. However, he, while maintaining coldness and confidence, calmly answered and told about the event. After that, he simply extended his massive hand forward, and Herod instinctively covered his face with his palms. He was engulfed by panic. It seemed that the next moment could be attacked with his fists. However, the young man only delicately grabbed his arms, quietly asking to create damble from adamant. The tone of his voice changed instantly. He became softer, warmer, and a special, captured fire appeared in his gaze. Harad, without hiding genuine surprise, looked carefully at the student and asked if he was referring to the dumbbells. The young man nodded, and then he got 2 dumbbells from under the floor and started to exercise lively. He had fun that he constantly maintains good physical fitness, so Harad can be convinced personally. Watching the spectacle, Harad thought, does the guy actually carry these dumbbells every day? The guy looked frustrated and admired that the dumbbells have become too easy for him lately, so his workout lacks strength and load. While he talked about it, he did not stop waving the dumbbells on all sides. Harad felt some anxiety and carefully retreated sideways, fearing that he could accidentally become a target for these dumbbells, and mentally noted that they should not be so inadvertently waved. The young man stopped, postponing the dumbbells aside with delicacy, and suddenly spoke with unprecedented enthusiasm. He told how he saw with his own eyes how Adamantine was given a sword from the alloy, capable of winning even the examiner. A real. Hearing about this sword, Cecilia immediately broke into the conversation without holding back her admiration. She asked the interlocutor with the fire in her eyes whether he also had to see what had happened. Gerard shuddered, because he did not even suspect that his new acquaintance was capable of such relentless curiosity. The girl now talked to the young man as if Garada did not exist nearby. Cecilia did not stay and confessed that he would be envied insanely and asked to talk about everything as possible. She frankly regretted she did not see it with her own eyes. The young man smiled warmly and assured that he would be pleased to share all his impressions. Garad, however, noted that it is possible to discuss this topic. After that, the young man again turned to Herod, asking what to do with dumbbells. At the same time, he stressed that he did not expect it to do it. He promised to thank for the assistance provided. Herod suspected that there was a conspiracy. Cecilia wondered if he would handle the task, isn't he? She assured that she would personally monitor each stage. However, Herod could not understand why she was so zealous on his side. Yet, the young man did not find reasons to deny him, so he confidently agreed. In his opinion, it even exceeded all his hopes. He smiled sincerely, full of gratitude. Immediately after that, Herod with a lot of dumbbells made the same dumbbells that he was asked. He made a few dumbbells and asked the guy if he was suitable for such options. In addition, he made dumbbells with different weights so that he could freely choose himself. The young man, with a fascination with all his eye and with delight, noted that it was a real miracle. He immediately began to test the dumbbells one by one, and immediately noticed that they would fit him perfectly. He was delighted. Herod felt glad and said with warmth that he was pleased to hear it. He then turned to his magic storage and confidently confirmed his actions. Before his eyes, the portal dissolved, and without seconds he began to scratch inside, as if he thought, somewhere it should be here. Cecilia and the guy froze nearby, stunned by what they saw. At the same moment, it was thought that it was not surprising in this, because the possession of the magic of storage for him was already a commonplace. Shortly after that, Harad got some strange tool from his supplies and, pointing to it, said, "Here it is." Hardly restraining the surprise, the guy, along with Cecilia, looked at him with the shadow of a reproach in his eyes, because they never had such a mechanism. The guy asked, "What is it?" However, Herod was already leaning over the unfamiliar device and, not paying attention to their curiosity, began to twist the levers skillfully. I am sure that he would soon reveal all his secrets. Suddenly, all the dumbbells, along with people, flew into the air. Cecilia, covered with unspeakable surprise, exclaimed that it is impossible to imagine even in the most bold fantasies. "That's him." Herod smiled satisfied and confirmed, "Yes, it is really a gravitational manipulator. It can be used again and again, and it could be obtained with dumbbells as an unexpected app." The man confessed in surprise that he had no idea that such things were simply given. At this point, their teacher entered the room and suggested that everyone in the place. 3 students froze, as if stunned at a teacher who had just appeared in the classroom. They have not yet been released by the force of the gravitational manipulator. The class leader Klai said that they fully understand their excitement, because today it is for everyone the first day. He calmly asked the students to hold back and take their seats. Harad, Cecilia, and that guy immediately apologized, sincerely showing his repentance. When the professor of the villages finished his greetings, Harad with new comrades plunged into a lively discussion of their own stories. Newly made friends have already exchanged names and settled in their places. It was then that Professor Cheel turned to the audience, inviting the next student to go to the board and tell about himself. The girl rose from the place and smiling quietly, assured that everything was well with her. The guy immediately noticed her charm and returned to Harad. He, with a sly smile, wondered if this girl seems to him. Only then did Harad finally turn to her. The girl, barely smiling with delight, said she was happy to meet each of the present. She introduced herself as Jasmine Valiva, and sincerely confessed she has a fervent desire to help his father, the president of the company specializing in bamboo production. That is why Jasmine seeks to use the capabilities of this academy. Harad almost instantly remembered the girl as soon as he immediately remembered how he saw her in the dining room earlier. It turned out to be the daughter of President Wright himself. Now everything has taken place. It is not surprising that she has such influential acquaintances. The young man wondered whether he realized correctly. He was supposed to meet that girl, because she is a real beauty. His conversation caused only an ironic look and sigh. The interlocutor stated that most likely to refuse this meeting, because he did not want to risk his work. The surprised guy stared at him and exclaimed, "What is the job? What are you about?" Obviously, Harada did not want to continue this conversation, so he carefully wondered if it was time to go. Only when he heard this, the man seemed to be ashamed and in silence. Yes, the time came. His name is Jan Zelgius, and he sincerely rejoices in this meeting. He again took his brand new dumbbells and confessed to a light tone that he was fond of sports. However, it added another unexpected thing. He turns out to be the country's first prince. Harad was confused, not knowing how to react. Is it a joke, or is it terrific? Apparently it would be worth starting with such information. At this time, Professor Kuhl, without a minute, invited the next student to approach closer. Harad slowly rose from his place and, after others, decided to introduce himself. He told the audience that comes from the distant mountain region. The professor did not resist and added that he heard of a vivid impression that Harad made on others. However, Harad only sighed, because the idea of competing at the academy with the first prince and daughter of the president seemed to him a real test. Finally, the first lecture ended, and the garage stayed alone at the desk, deeply immersed in the pages of your favorite book. He watched carefully, noticing that magical elements have a unique nature. Combine the features and waves and particles. Joni approached the tireless training. Funny squeezing him with a botanist he suggested to work together. Garad postponed the book and wondered. He probably did not take such an initiative. Interested in, John asked what he was holding garages and what he took his attention. In response, the guy explained, "Here is explored how magical elements interact with waves." John, a little puzzled, said, "What other elements and waves?" Arad explained that all magical elements are similar in properties, so if you use magic that is in the enemy's anti-phase, any charm can be completely disposed of. John honestly acknowledged that he did not understand this explanation at all. Couldn't you put it in a more affordable language? Herod, holding his gaze, wondered, what does it mean? Subsequently, he thought that magical elements were more appropriate to imagine as a gear inside the wheel. It caused a surprise to Jan, and he asked, "Do you mean a real gear?" The parade noted that they got two completely identical things. However, if you try to connect them together, they will turn, right? And now, instead of mechanical gears, let it add a drop of sorcery. John nodded, making it clear that he understood everything. By dividing the workout into individual muscle groups, you can significantly increase the effectiveness of exercises for each of them. Sounds quite convincing, isn't it? Yet Karat opposed this approach, calling him Bunawa Ho. Jan warmly hugged him, hinting that it was time not only to pump not only brains, but also muscles. The garage, meanwhile, mentally noted how unbearable Yang is. Smiling, Jan added that tomorrow they will have to train together. Subsequently, at the Academy Training Center, a New Year teacher announced that today's lesson will be completely devoted to the practice of magical combat. Students should unite in a couple and come together in a specially created combat simulation for 1 hour. The task is clear. Teachers will evaluate their combat skills to further compare the level of each participant. First of all, the ability to defend themselves. This applies to those who have already successfully passed the creative exam and the rest of the participants. The check will start with an unusual student. The first was Harad. Confidently made a few steps forward and assured everyone that it is not necessary to worry. Hadar's name was just a whole haul. It became clear to everyone at once. It is now that he should come forward and show his skill. Among the students, the noise rose. They discussed, of course, he himself, and this clearly did not add to Hadar's confid. He also noted Jasmine, who, like others, was fascinated by everything that happened and seemed to be watching him. He did not want her to notice his clumsiness. It seemed that the excitement finally took the mountain. It only added tension, and the nerves tensed to the limit. However, two of his closest comrades were openly on his side, not trying to hide their dedication. Ian, without hesitation, told Cecilia that it was their product that was able to create adamant almost from the air. Cecilia confirmed this, ironically called him, and then asked what he would sacrifice this time. Harad, this did not cause me any joy. He just looked at them with annoyance, as if everything was going on, a solid light, hearted sight. The professor could not stand, and in his voice he came anger. He reproached them for excessive noise. Then the woman went to Harada and firmly stated that it was finally time to take place. With each new attack, she enhanced her magical power, forcing him to focus on defense. Harada assured her that she understands everything. He sought to put all his strength, but doubted whether the reverse phase could completely neutralize our magic. Then the professor noted that this task will be much more difficult than it seems. Surprised by such an answer, Harad turned her gaze and wondered if it was true. The woman strongly announced that she would immediately strike the strongest blow so that he would not waste time. Such a passion was quite alarmed by Harad, and he asked in surprise, why not start with more cautious actions? The young man was engulfed by unspeakable anxiety, and he was convinced that there was no chance to escape. Using his analytical mind, he was convinced that nothing would slip away from his watchful look. Having mastered himself, he began to act more confidently and decisively. When he flew on him, the guy quickly put his hand, deciding, this is the appropriate magic. Without hesitation, he applied the spell. In response, the professor just smiled and said that he would be interested in checking whether he would handle the challenge. However, the young man easily parked the attack of the professor without taking a step back. Everything happened so lightning that the audience simply did not have time to understand what happened. It seemed that nothing changed in space. Even the professor has frozen for a moment, stunned by a surprise. And then she shrugged and confessed that her magic had not worked. Is it all because she faces a monster student? It was visible how she had anxiety and increasing anxiety. Her rod, as if feeling the confusion of the hostess, was also raised by a wave of dissatisfaction, catching something really strange in the air. Maybe it's just dreaming. However, despite all doubts, he was satisfied with himself, because at least his guess was true. He seems to have dared to apply what he read in the book. This seemed to some extent risky, although it could hardly threaten the case. While Jan worked constantly with dumbbells, he said with delight that he was on top of joy. It sounded as if such a condition and innumerable talents of Herod had already become everyday life for him and no longer caused surprise. Cecilia only nodded in response, adding that he was really struck by Herod again with his act. Jasmine was slamming for a moment, and then enthusiastically exclaimed, "This is a real miracle!" She thought if someone was able to understand what she saw. For her, who first witnessed this spectacle, everything seemed unthinkable. John, however, the professor did not intend to stop. She categorically did not want to concede to the student. Having apologized to Gerard, she pitied because of the situation, but promised that they would definitely try again. Gerard was stunned by such perseverance and did not even have time to recover, as he was about to deny something. However, because of a lot of excitement, it was difficult for him to gather thoughts, although he assured that he could repeat his success again. The woman did not even finish the phrase. Without going into explanation, she instantly went on the offensive. Despite the extraordinary excitement, the guy repelled his teacher's offensive again. However, the situation repeated exactly as it was for the first time. It seemed that the magic of a woman simply did not work on his rod, as if she had lost any power. As a result, everything remained in the same way as before. The teacher got in a confusion, murmuring, "What is the wonder with her magic?" Among the quiet audience, strange surprise prevailed. None of the students said the word, but embarrassment was swept in the air. She tried several more times, but every attempt was in vain. None of the blows could do the boy at least the slightest harm. Her rod remained completely intact, as if there was no attack. The rest of the students froze in silent surprise, stunned by what happened. No one understood what is the matter. Herida, noticing the expression of the teacher's face, hurried to her, wanted to explain something. But the teacher stopped him with a gesture, confessing that she feels completely lost. And he, after all, also had the responsibility of the class teacher. She waved tears and firmly stated her intention to resign today. Nevertheless, Harad, even if he did not want to, eventually forced the poor woman to make such a difficult decision. His words stunned all the students, and it seemed that he almost brought her to tears. In the hall, full silence reigned. Everyone froze with surprise. Gerard was confused by such an unexpected change in circumstances, because he did not want it at all. He genuinely persuaded the professor to rush with the final decisions early. However, it remained adamant. It was pointless to learn from someone who herself was not able to cope with magic. Herod denied that the problem is not in knowledge or skill. He only interrupted the process of activation of magic, no more. The magic itself has not disappeared, it is still here. The professor was surprised to follow his actions. She seemed to boil and did not restrain her anger, calling it a real bundle. Herod was only more confused and tried to apologize to her. The professor approached him and began to reproach. She wondered what her words caused activation, and in general, how did it happen? Jared, swaying under her gaze, confessed that he came across this idea in one of the books and decided to check whether he would work. The teacher ironically noted that she would not mind experimenting. After these words, she relaxed somewhat and said, "It was about interference with magical circles, so how did he manage to master such complex technique at such a young age? Ask him, please, not to use this skill. Have agreed. Does not require much more time to mastery of interval magic. He could try, for example, a steam shell. The spell is quite safe without any harm." But Harad only shook his head and denied his way. He learned to use magic completely differently. The woman, without hiding the curiosity, looked at him with genuine surprise. Herod argued that his actions were far from complex magic. In fact, everything is much easier. It only dismantled magical energy, disguising it with the power of the opposite element. Magic, although endowed with power, is not all-powerful, has its own restrictions. The technique that was used only provokes pain. The woman was annoyed even more. She raised her voice, passionately demanding explanations. The situation is not easy. In the end, she sighed heavily, disappointed by confessing that she was so exhausted that she was all ready. In this case, they will say it. Although his achievements raise some questions, he still remains the best student. Garad noted that such a result was too fuzzy. Jan smiled noticeably, and confidently stated that, given his numerous abilities, it is a common phenomenon. In response, Cecilia sewed a good smile and wondered if all this deserved that attention. For the first time, Herod did not restrain his anger, asking them the question, "Is this situation really entertained?" Meanwhile, Jasmine came and gently reminded Herod that he remained the last, so there was no point in worrying. Herod smiled at that, and noted that it is good that she perceives everything that Jasmine, with a smile, noted that she was trying to convey it before. After all, the title of the best student is not just a reason for pride. Herod shook his head. In no way. He is still far from this honor, ahead of many lessons and trials. Jasmine looked at him with a slight reproach, asking why he so formally addressed it. The interlocutor turned his eyes and replied that there were reasons for this. Their conversation did not go unnoticed. There was Cecilia nearby, and, interested in what was happening, also decided to listen. Jasmine advised Geru to change the way he turns to himself, assuring that there was nothing shy or strange about it. Jer, saying her name, agreed. It's really interesting. Meanwhile, Cecilia noticed that Jer and Lady Jasmine still have common topics for talking. However, it was difficult for her to understand why this thought was so worried. The professor then addressed the next student, proposing to show his knowledge here and now. But suddenly from heaven, like an unexpected gift, a feather was easy to go on her palm. She looked at the find and asked if she was really a pen. The girl looked truly frightened, claiming that this cannot be. This simply does not exist. Going closer, Herod asked what had happened. Lift, they noticed in the sky a giant griffin, a bizarre creature with a powerful body of an eagle and lion paws. The professor engulfed unspeakable horror. He argued that the power of this creature is so great that even the most experienced adventurer of class and is not capable of resisting. But despite fear, he had to climb even higher. Then Griffin rolled, radiating the threat. The tester appealed to the students to be careful and listen to her words. All the disputes between them were officially frozen at this time. They should act with extreme caution. Only one touch of his claws is enough, and for them everything will end forever. So how to act? After all, he relentlessly rushes on them. The whole class immediately picked up his head and froze in an alarming look without taking his eyes from the monster. Someone stuck on the spot disorderly, deciding, if the monster moves to them, they end. Another student, whitewashing from fear, mutteredly murmured, "It turns out, now we are only easy to pray for him, eh?" The atmosphere of fear and anxiety prevailed. No one had no idea what was waiting for them in the future. Jonas tried not to express his emotions, though he was torn and uncertainty inside. Gathering with his forces, he asked what the matter. Hadar has come closer and warned that getting to him means to doom himself to the inevitable death. Smiling, he assured that they would cope faster than him. The teacher looked at her student with fear, as if she got lost in his unexpected words, and she said he could not understand. Before her, a genius or someone is extremely meaningless. However, Griffin did not intend to spend time waiting for the steps of enemies. He took the initiative and attacked the first. The monster was lightning from the place, rushing directly to a cohesive group of students. The professor stressed that it is on the verge of a grand opening. They had to make every effort to stay out of his attention. The next moment, Griffin swept past them with lightning. The professor returned to the students lightly, concerned about asking if they were all well. Cecilia replied that happened to Jasmine. Professor looked at the girl with anxiety, asking, "What happened?" Honda instantly realized what is the matter. I glanced up to Griffon, already rising in heights. In his strong paws, a frightened Jasmine was kept breathing. Gadar studied the monster intently, mentioning all the information about him in tense to choose the most effective strategy in this difficult fight. In his thoughts, he noted, Griffin rightly wears the title of creating the highest class. His glory is based not only on exceptional endurance and strength, but also on remarkable intelligence, which makes him a particularly dangerous opponent. For the most part, Griffins are hunting on weak and defenseless creatures, and everyone else just causes such a horror that they run wherever. With this Griffin, it is likely that there will be no problems. Looking at Jasmine, his face reflected anxiety. Suddenly she will suffer. It is better not to take risks. It could come closer, but in the event of danger, it will be forced to preserve every crumb of his mana. Come closer. It is now that the young man seems to mention one idea. Hadar turned to Joni, who, fortunately, stood quite close, and asked the device of managing gravity. Did this device remain with it? John met with a friend and nodded confidently. The device was with him. After that, Hadar carefully asked if he could borrow that device at least for a long time. John did not pass the device to his friend, without any hesitation. Hadar strongly accepted him, and promised to prevent the gravity weakened to the limit. He focused on throwing the device from the Griffin as much as possible. Meanwhile, John himself decided to save his Manu at the most critical moment. Yana engulfed anxiety, and he hurriedly asked a friend if he was really confident in the success of this idea. But Hadar only nodded in response. He said, there was no time left for reflection, and only he could help. And his power is another advantage, so let him interfere with him. He simply has no right to leave Jasmine in trouble. The Hadar then activated his device, and John focused that he as much as possible to lift a friend to the sky, informed that they were already at the start and ready to go. Hardly had happened, as Gadar lightning broke into the sky, aiming directly at the Griffin. At this time, others stood fate, only silently watching the events. The professor, without resting, exclaimed, "What? The devils would conceive this self-sacrificed, excessive reckless and at the same time frightening smart." Meanwhile, Gadar was already on a dangerous closeness to the monster and realized that from such a distance he would probably not affect Jasmine. He soon took advantage of his magic, saying the spell that had to penetrate it through. The guy mentioned the skills acquired from his mother and summoned the dragon fire. A powerful wave of magical flames lightly struck the target. The Griffon was shining with pain, and Jasmine, still clamped in his paws, almost fell because of its suddenly trembling. The girl glaredly glanced at all around as if she begged, "What is the foolishness?" But suddenly she felt that the grip the Griffin weakened. Jasmine froze, and in a moment she pulled out of powerful claws by the monster. She flew down rapidly. The girl was almost embarrassed with the inevitable end, but Hadar appeared in a decisive moment. He lightly picked her up in her arms and, barely noticeably smiling, gently asked if this adventure had caused her. She looked at the boy in confusion, not believing in her own eyes. He was still at the griffin, and now he had time to be near when she fell. Jasmine asked with interest how he found himself here. She was high in the sky, and Hadar explained that John helped him to get here. Now, thanks to his magical ability to fly, he proposes to go on the ground safely and advises her to hold firmly. Jasmine looked at him in surprise and wondered if he was a man at all. It was when they were preparing to climb back to the surface of their native land. The griffin was suddenly descended from the sky. He was unharmed and quite ready for another attack. Hadar traditionally remained unmoved, as if everything that happened around had nothing to do with him. He noted that he apparently showed extra condescension to him. Although Griffin is wounded, but the fire of fighting in it has not been gone. Jasmine, closing her eyes, asked quietly, "Was it true that he was so soft with him?" Hadar again directed his magic into the battle, and with determination stated that it was time to deal with this griffin finally. He then called on his powerful magic, the fire dragon of the lightning fire. After ruthless magical attacks, Griffin was barely on his feet. The forces left him, and survived after such a test became almost unrealistic. His power faded, and now nothing could protect the students from the danger. Jasmine did not look away from the griffin, which just started to fall. This sight was striking to the depths of her soul. Herod, in turn, noted that it is extremely pleased to arrive at the right time. Looking at the girl, he quietly confessed, if something had happened, he would not be dared to look at her father in the eye. Jasmine, in response, only looked at him in a confusion, and in a moment they stood on the ground again. The gift and Jasmine were right near the bodies of the vultures, and in a moment, the rest of the members of the detachment ran to them. The professor rushed forward, and full of excitement, immediately asked the students if they were fine with them. Hadar hurried to assure that she had everything wonderful. Jasmine also supported her, adding that nothing extraordinary had happened to them. Without hesitation, the professor hugged her wards firmly. She reconnected Hadar as he climbed into the sky and, thanks to incomparable magic, immediately destroyed the griffin. However, there were many questions about him. Hadar understood that he was waiting for a difficult conversation and decided that all these inquisitive questions were better answered later. The professor, with a sincere gratitude, emphasized how extremely pleased that both remained alive. Let her weakness forgive her. If this is repeated, it will be their protection without hesitation. She then turned to Hadar again, noting that, in her opinion, he deserves maximum scores from compulsory discipline, including combat magic. She is going to talk to the director immediately. Hadar, confused and impressed with such words, could not believe in what he heard and looked at the professor. He addressed the woman with a question, trying to understand the meaning of what he saw. In response, she explained that in fact, everything was clear here. After a deep sigh, the woman wondered what she could teach him. Apparently, the rest of the mentors would share its point of view. However, Hadar frankly did not approve of this position, and considered such thoughts an absolute nonsense. The professor strictly noted that he could teach it something, not the other way around. Meanwhile, Gadaru, still not aware of his own exclusivity, felt completely confused and could not understand what was happening. The professor noted that she perfectly understands how strange it may seem. However, she is firmly convinced that such can happen at any moment, so she needs to be alert. In such circumstances, it is best to turn to him for advice. Hadar has not yet realized why the choice fell on him and what true weight has this situation. John has taken a vigorous professor's phrase, sincerely assured that he was also encouraged to find out more from the mentor. Cecilia, who stood side by side and followed the conversation, immediately joined, adding her unambiguous yes. Hadar, puzzled with such an unexpected unanimity, rounded his eyes and asked if they were not causing him sometimes. He himself did not go to the faith when these two managed to make friends so. The professor was already talking with all the students who remained in the audience, promising to study in detail the consequences of this attack. After that, she allowed them to rest a little. Meanwhile, Hadar decided that it was time to finally set the order here before the next couple. The boy had the appearance of a person who suddenly got into a completely unfamiliar place. It seemed extremely inconvenient because of everything that happened around. It was at this moment that Jasmine, full of gratitude for the salvation, approached him and called him her true hero with a trepidation. Hadar, who was embarrassed from such praise, hastened to assure that he was not worthy of such a title. Jasmine confessed that she did not know how to thank him. The only thing left for her was to sincerely express her gratitude. Hadar did not protest at all, but on the contrary, he gladly agreed, adding that he would just be happy if they were able to make fun. Jasmine, in response with surprise and admiration, was staring at him. After that, she, not waiting for her, began to strictly blame herself. Having considered how unsuccessful her replica was, the girl exclaimed aloud that she was a real fool. That's right. Unsuccessful and inappropriate, made ahead of him. Hadar was so surprised that he even shuddered and hurried to ask what was so unnoticeable in her words. Jasmine, ashamed, lowered her gaze and thought, why is everything so easy for him? Why is he so easy to offer friendship? The girl's cheeks flashed pink when she thought whether it was worth talking about it. But now it has no weight. After a short pause, the girl gathered with thoughts and said directly, if she ever needed her help, just go. Hadar looks at Yasmin with surprise, not imagining what she really thinks. Yasmin added that if he suddenly needed money, she is ready to he. Jasmine warned that time to go because their next lesson would begin. The girl seems to take his hand to lead. Hadar asked her not to rush or pull it too gently. Soon the whole group returned to the audience where a new teacher was already waiting for them. The students took their places, carefully preparing for the lesson. The teacher immediately made it clear that he was aware of the events thanks to Professor Klell. But he emphasized that the fact that everyone remained intact considers a great achievement and a real miracle. Returning to the board, the man calmly announced that it was time to return to the class and asked the students to deploy their notes. Hadar was a little surprised by such an inviolability of the professor and thought that his balance was really impressive. The teacher took the chalk and brought out a sophisticated magical circle on the board, after which he announced, today's theme is alchemy. The students will try to create a crystal for the first time using a textbook scheme. At the same time, they have to carefully pour sand within the magical circle. While the professor explained the conditions of the task in detail, Hadar has already prepared everything and confidently announced his readiness. This rapid pace was quite impressed by Cecilia and Jasmine. They watched Hadar with delight, surprised by his lightning humility. Jasmine joked a little, reminding him that he was in no hurry. The surprised Hadar asked what she meant. Jasmine's gaze stopped at Genov, who, despite everything around, continued his workout. Interested in why he chose this moment, she asked the relevant question. Yang, keeping inviolability, slowly replied that drawing was difficult for him. Even drawing an elementary circle or ordinary or charming, for him a real problem. Yasmina, without drawing a close look from Hadur, reported to Cecilia that this time an exceptional student appeared in the foreground. After that, she cast her gaze on John, noting that on the other hand there is a prince who was just crazy from training. She looked at the girl and wondered if she was not easy with the two, right? Cecilia sincerely thanked her for his caring, and noted that she appreciated it. After these words, tears splashed from the eyes of Cecilia. She was moving. How important to her. At least someone understood her. Jasmine wondered whether this means that they would put each other's shoulder in a difficult moment. Our hero is Comfu. That evening, after completing the classes, a festive feast was organized for students. Hadar and John enthusiastically plunged into the atmosphere of the holiday, sincerely rejoicing in everything that happened around. Their look immediately stopped on the tables, which was laid down by various flavors. Everything looked so seductive and delicious that it was difficult to hold back. Suddenly, looking to the center of the table, everyone saw the chopped head of the griffin, the one who won the lesson. Inside, a slight annoyance boiled, so he did not resist, and wondered why they put this head here, and whether there was some sense. Suddenly, it seemed to him that the process of food has become a real test, especially when this giant man looks at him. Did he make the mistake of choosing this place? But Ion did not bother it at all. He was already enthusiastically coped with the giant mountain of meat, gladly shouting that he finally found his paradise for meat. At that moment, his teacher approached Hadar and, with a slight smile, confessed that she would never think that Griffin would appear among the dishes of the holiday table. Hadar was alert and wondered that she did not like it, but the stranger assured that it wasn't about it. In fact, this delicacy is considered a true luxury. It is rarely seen that every appearance becomes a great sensation. But can she really just take it and try this meat without giving way? Jan is convinced that it is likely. After all, Such a wonderful dish cannot just disappear. The woman smiled and noted that if the prince himself insisted, she was probably not left choosing. Gadar approached John and sincerely thanked him for today's support. He noted that John hit the apple. Jan, with a calm smile, replied, "There is nothing to do." "Well, what does he plan now?" Hadar cast a wary look at him. Jana, barely noticeably smiling, warned him not to disgrace himself. This was especially true of Jasmine. Jan came closer, almost whispering in her ear, "Did you really decide to take the risk of helping her? Is that so?" Hadar looked at him confusedly, not at all understanding what he was talking about, and assured him he did not have such a desire. He avoids disappointment. Suddenly, Jasmine appeared in front of her and asked if something was wrong with her. Her voice sounded through the shadows, and a familiar whisper behind her back became almost pleasant. For Hadar, this unexpected appearance was a complete surprise. He was already giving up such developments. Seeing their face expressions, Jasmine Wu wondered whether they had serious intentions. Zingar hastened to assure that this is not true. Jasmine, without trusting his words, asked once again whether he was really sure of his beliefs. This is exactly how John said. And this is the absolute truth. Since he first met Hadar, he proves once after that he is able to amaze every time more. Jasmine agreed with this, adding that this does not do any doubt. He can always expect pleasant surprises. Gadar noted that in person, he was not entitled to talk about a miracle. Jasmine and Jean cast interested views on him. Then Gadar shared that before his accession to the academy, he lived with his mother humanist somewhere in the mountains. Although he did not want to part with her, he soon met a wonderful company after joining. Every day with these friends, he became a real elaboration of events filled with vivid experiences and strong emotions. It is worth emphasizing that it is more reminiscent of a real miracle than magic. I am gratefully grateful to you for my sincere friendship with him. Hearing these words, Time Man with John froze in a moment. Hadar drew attention to their unusual behavior and asked, "What happened to them?" Ian, embarrassed with his eyes, confessed that he really was, often forced to voice such uncomfortable things. However, Gadar did not see anything wrong with this, and treated the situation with her simplicity. Yasmin was also extremely confused, and advised him to weigh her every word well. This time, Hadar felt a real discomfort and wondered. He confessed to something superfluous, even not wanting it. Jan returned to Jasmine, and with a tricky smile noted that her blushed cheeks were probably the result of Hara's words. Jasmine, a little lost, asked what he was talking about. In response, Jan leaned to her even closer and whispered something in her ear. Jasmine was embarrassed, blushed and exploded, accusing the interlocutor of impolite. Hadar asked what his fault was. Jasmine did not resist and reproached Jan, emphasizing that he was still a prince of this state. Is there no drops of sophistication and the ability to treat dignity in his muscular head? Yang, in response, noted that love could change the whole world around. But Jasmine strongly stated that such changes were not justified at all. Gadar, wanting to reassure the disputes, tried to reconcile them and persuaded them to be common sense. At that time, Jasmine exploded with rage, crying it and demanding explanations, they say, through whom all this fuss arose and what he thought. Hadar was completely confused and cast a pleading look at Cecilia in search of support. At the same moment, he suddenly realized that there was no figure nearby. Looking at all sides, the guy with anxiety asked, "Where is the Cecilia?" Ever since he saw her last, so long that it is not possible to remember. Where did it go? Meanwhile, Cecilia remained quite near this hall, covered with a burning headache, which did not rest it. She grabbed her head and exclaimed, the piercing pain shed through her temple. After lessons. Hadar lingered in the classroom when others had already dispersed to personally talk to the teacher. He carefully watched her expression and asked, "Are you probably worried about the future, isn't it?" The woman has exhausted hard, casting a reproach look. Such sarcastic remarks are clearly inappropriate, and she is not going to endure it. In response, Hadar confessed that he had a serious topic for conversation. The tense features of his face were eloquently issued deep concern. He frankly confessed that he has no idea what he wants to do in the future. Jasmine and Yang have long been decided on their way, although the situation still causes him a slight embarrassment. The professor reassured him, emphasizing, these two are rather a rare exception to the rule, and he was able to become anyone who sincerely wants. and if it is important for him to hear the exact answer, then she thinks that. After a short pause, the woman thoughtfully advised him to try her hand in different areas to understand what is closer to his heart. Moreover, she already had one interesting idea for him. Soon, having listened to the advice of the mentor, he visited the collection of students. There, one of the girls announced that some of the audience would be able to take a course in the management of potion orders and master other relevant tasks. Alternative classes were also offered. Treatment and diagnosis of simple cases. Everyone could choose the direction he likes. Only those who have mastered healing magic are allowed to practice this art. Harad, with a living interest, he followed the conversation and noted that he would also be interested in trying his strength in this. Suddenly, his gaze stopped at Cecilia. Sincere surprise broke out in his eyes. He did not expect to meet her here. The girl herself also looked confused and stunned. Cecilia asked what brought him to this place. Gerard explained that he had addressed the teacher for advice on his professional journey, and she advised him to come here. He sincerely rejoiced in their appearance, especially noting that she also visited, and it was a lot of delayed him. That Cecil did not share his joy, and immediately confessed that her mood was overshadowed by an unexpected anxiety. Next to him, she seems invisible and modest, like a gray mouse. Herod was surprised if she really wanted him to leave her. Cecilia calmly replied that she was intending to make such a decision. Further, their path ran to the hospital located at the church. There, women briefly and clearly told that they are here that they support those who need treatment. She advises them to work only with simple cases, as the symptoms are often very different, from abdominal pain and coughing to various injuries. However, the most important thing is to remain calm, because then there will be no difficulty. If you need help, there are always helpers next to. Boldly refer to them with support or advice. Herod and Cecilia assured that there was nothing unusual about it. When the girls left the room to demonstrate their talents, Cecilia returned to him and advised him with genuine perseverance. It is worth teaching to the full. Herod was frankly glad that she shared his views, and especially noted her unwavering determination. He had no doubt that she was able to achieve his intended. Cecilia has sincerely admitted that she was looking forward to finding a job. Then each of them approached their patient to carefully examine. The patient asked in Cecilia if he was indeed worthy that such a charming girl paid his attention to him this evening. From his frankness, Cecilia was confused and, a little awkward, wondered, did he really consider her so attractive? The man convinced her of his frankness. It is enough to see her. And the pain recedes. From these words, Cecilia embarrassedly and excitedly lowered her eyes, because she promised to make every effort for him, her first patient. Such an unexpected turn of events seems to be captured by suddenly. Suddenly, grabbing a rapid sound, a girl rushed to the scene and asked what happened. Meanwhile, the man is already faint. Cecilia was confused, not understanding what to do next, and only began to apologize in front of him. She announced that she would take advantage of the charms that are best suited for his illness. Will he frankly share what is worried about him? In her gaze, deep anxiety was read. The man stated that they would start with the most precision zones. Cecilia has suggested that he should be more careful. Herod, who stood behind the screen and heard everything perfectly, thought that her worries were a little exaggerated. So he immediately returned to his patient and explained in detail which spell would give the best result. After all, to choose the wrong way of treatment is a serious mistake that should be avoided. The guy wondered, analyzed all the options, and suddenly it was illuminated by a wonderful thought. Without wasting time, he reported that all the preparations were completed. The patient expressed gratitude to him, noting that the knee feels much better. Gerard asked if there were other troubles that were worried. The patient confirmed that he still had complaints. I politely asked him to wait a few minutes. Subsequently, the patient was surprised. The vision became better, and the slaughter was not. He was not quickly passed, without leaving a trace. The annoying runny nose disappears, and the small scratch is tightened. The skin looks healthy and clean. Cecilia, listening carefully to the story, did not hold back the admiration. In her opinion, it is a real miracle. She could not restrain her curiosity, and looking after the screen, noted that she did not suffer to find out what he was busy all this time. Gerard constantly performed the procedure, convincing the patient that this way could achieve perfect recovery. Cecilia was struck by this picture. She did not resist, and wondered if it was the art of healing the highest grade. As soon as he graduated from the patient's examination, he was approached by Cecilia. She expressed doubt. Should she be used to apply this spell to a patient with a hopeless diagnosis? Garad only replied with a barely noticeable smile. And is there a rule that limits the choice of magic? However, it is worth looking on the other side. Now nothing wrong with this person. Cecilia also noted that such powerful magic was in vain. Of course, the patient's condition has improved significantly, but even the assistants look stunned. She is convinced that he just broke her. Herod could not hurt why everyone was so surprisingly reacting, and wondered if it was not the usual consequence of extremely powerful magic. For reassurance, he twice made sure that there were no new symptoms after treatment. Cecilia, meanwhile, noted that he was doing everything. The girl relaxed a little, and noted that in general, everything was fine. However, she wondered if he felt tired after all this. Herod assured her that he was not feeling great. His mana is usually replenished instantly as soon as it is exhausted, but now it is almost gone. Cecilia surrendered and confessed that she did not understand anything. All this happened only because of his uneasiness. This explanation will make it much easier to settle. Her rod was suddenly thoughtful, claiming that he is an ordinary man. And no. Cecilia wondered how it is possible at all. Simple mortals are incapable of mastering magic known as absolute healing. Garad noted that there are also other similar spells. Suddenly, their altercation broke up a helper who was already escaped after a short weakness. She called them to calm down. Her look spoke without words. Yes, she appreciates their friendship and understands human emotions, but reminds, do not forget about responsibilities. Cecilia and Herod immediately tightened and apologized to her. Cecilia returned to her cozy working corner behind the screen and said with certainty that they should do their best. In response, Herod smiled at her and promised that he would definitely cope with this business. Sudden, acute pain pierced the girl's head, forcing her to shake and drew up to the floor. Her stone guard immediately rushed to her, full of anxiety, asking if nothing serious had happened. Cecilia, trying to reassure him, assured that everything is fine. It is just another attack of headache. It happens regularly with it, so don't worry about it. However, almost instantly it was pierced by such a burning headache that it was impossible to stay. The girl settled on the floor and broke into a shrill cry, unbearably suffering from painful feelings. Other helpers immediately came to the cries. Some of them wondered in surprise that it was a noise. Her rod told that they had just been about to disperse in her business, as she suddenly grabbed her head and shook her head, falling straight on the floor. He was completely shot down from the panther, not understanding what happened. The assistant assured that they would find out the cause of the event. The girl focused on the circumstances and came to the conclusion that there is no normal anesthesia. It was necessary to involve the most powerful healing witchcraft. In a moment, several assistants joined it, who, without delay, were a high-level spell aimed at narrowing the blood vessels. However, none of these steps facilitated the torment of Cecilia. The assistant was completely confused, not knowing what to do next, and with annoyance recognized their helplessness. Chaos grew constantly, absorbing everything around. At this moment, Garad dared to accept responsibility and act on its own. He suddenly approached his girlfriend, realizing that such a gesture was completely untimely in the eyes of outsiders. But he just couldn't keep it away. He then applied his unique healing abilities, and the girl instantly enveloped a feeling of relief. Herod asked Cecilia if she was feeling well. The girl assured that everything was fine with her, and sincerely thanked for his attention and care. However, even perfect healing brought her only short-term relief. Acute, unbearable headache quickly returned, filling her with suffering. The gift was surprised that his attempt did not produce any results, and wondered if the effect would really be temporary. The assistant was also unable to hide the surprise. She expressed her impression. She was explained that even the most powerful magic is not capable of suppressing this pain. Perhaps the pain has the ability to accumulate? The hard made Hadar dive into deep reflections. He realized that the pain that Cecilia is called suicide headache. Unbearable feelings occur suddenly and disappear as without a trace, without being subjected to any, even supernatural healing for. Then he resorted to magic, unfolding several fascinated circles around the perimeter. The assistant was stunned that a real magical circle was in front of them. He did not believe his eyes. This could not happen in real life. One of the saints has been devotion to the creation of ritual circles for almost an hour, and although it takes a long time, the likelihood of their activation reaches impressive 99%. To enhance the action of magic, Hadar gently hugged Cecilia, promising that having made tremendous effort and spending considerable reserves of magical energy, he will be able to heal all her wounds and take away pain. As soon as he accumulated enough magical energy, immediately activated his unique ability, absolute healing. Cecilia sighed with a clear relief. She was enveloped in lightness, and for the first time in a long time she was able to breathe freely on her breasts. With hope in her eyes, she noticed how the pain gradually subsides and recedes. Hadar did not stop spelling all this time, carefully keeping the pain at a distance of her enchantments. Cecilia brought her eyes and noticed how he gently wraps her to himself. In response, the girl gave him a gentle smile and responded with mutual hugs filled with warmth. Finally, the girl completely healed. Hadar's strict view accompanied her question. "Now all is well, right?" Feeling relief, she barely smiled and confirmed with a lightweight sigh. The assistant approached them with a sincere surprise in the voice. How is it possible? She could not imagine that he was able to give the fullest healing. Soon all the assistants assigned to their group also turned their views. The girls leaned into the bow, sincerely thanking Hadar for saving their girlfriend. They openly admitted that the concern for her treatment should lie on them. Hadar felt uncomfortable because of such attention, and asked the girls not to lower their heads. After all, he sincerely wanted to help, acting as circumstances allowed. If you accidentally cross the border, apologize. It was necessary to get permission first. The assistant looked at him with surprise and wondered if he was not really offended. What nobility appeared in his act? But this time the girl turned to him differently, honored him with the title of the Lord, and voiced him that he was the epitome of a deity among mortals. Cecilia picked up this opinion, strongly assuring that this is how everything happens. Hadar lowered a look at his girlfriend with surprise, asking why she shares their point of view. With the end of the internship, the working day approached the end, and the assistants allowed them to go. Cecilia, squeezing a little bag with gold coins in her palm, smiling fun. She noted that although their appearance made a real noise, the reward seemed more than generous. Meanwhile, Hadar did not pay any attention to her words. He was completely absorbed by his favorite thing. He plunged into reading his books. The girl noticed it and wondered why she needed a collection of questions for treatment exam. Hadar cautiously put the books in his hiding place and explained that he had just received the proposal to take the exam right now. Cecilia immediately suggested that if he successfully passes the test, then he will receive an additional remuneration as a healer, isn't it? For him, it was only a small little thing. Hadar did not quite share her opinion, and noted that such statements are only a consequence of its absence of personal experience in such situations. Cecilia suddenly swept embarrassment in the presence of Hadar, so she turned to him and sincerely asked for everything that happened that day. Hadar did not hide his surprise. It seemed strange that she was concerned about such little things and was in vain. He confidently assured the girl, "There is no guilt here, so the apology is absolutely needed." However, Cecil remained adamant and claimed that it was not true. Her continuous jokes against him eventually led to a small dispute between them. For the first time in a long time, they remained alone, and it seems that it even seized a little. Hadar, with a slight embarrassment, cast his gaze to her direction. Cecilia sincerely thanked for salvation from the tormented headache, emphasizing how important it was for her. She could still not fully believe that all this had happened, and said with conviction, it was Hadar who returned her well-being. Every day her life was imbued with fear. She was just waiting for a new explosion of horror. However, with its appearance, everything has changed radically. The terrible reality retreated, leaving behind only the shadow of the past. In fact, during the internship, she was always ready to put her shoulder to anyone who got into a difficult situation, even if there were minor troubles. Hadar smiled, noting that, in his opinion, she brilliantly accomplished this task. He is also convinced that it was her intervention that saved his life. And now the girl looked at him with a combination of distrust and sincere surprise. Hadar remembered his first day at the academy. Then, in the entrance exams, he was more confident than ever. And it was she who came to the rescue, became his inspiration. Cecilia, however, said, saying, there was nothing prominent in this. She just couldn't leave him in a difficult minute. Darka thought for a moment and said with a slight reproach, it seems that she began to show it from the same moment. Cecilia was well aware of the justice of his words, so she became a little awkward, but she quickly replied that it was only a fiction of his imagination. Do not give him the reason to consider it. Hadar emphasized that she is genuinely pleased with the opportunity to support her, because she is of great importance to him. The appearance of one friend was really perceived as something extraordinary. The girl was confused by his unexpected words. Her cheeks were immediately overwhelmed by shame. She asked not to say this more. Dara was noticeably confused, seeing her reaction, so he did not ask that it was from his words that she was embarrassed. The girl, even more quickly, turned away, trying to hide the blush, and asked timidly why he was saying it all. But, despite its external restraint, her soul overwhelmed joy, and she could not get rid of the thought, "I really's really special for him? Is that really so? He also occupies an important place in her heart, and her idea of it is different from him. One day, she will certainly find the courage to open up and tell about her true feelings." Bugged with thought, the girl suddenly exclaimed, "Here it is." She was overwhelmed by an unexpected insight. She quickly asked if her cheeks were really a blush. Cecilia with a smile noted that he was to blame for everything. Hadar, somewhat disturbed, wondered if they actually lost something really essential. Is there something that even the strongest healing does not handle? This issue required immediate resolution. Cecilia tried to relieve tension, gently convincing him that there is no reason to worry. Such things happen, and there is nothing unusual about it. The next day, everyone came together for a professor's lesson. The girl announced that today they are waiting for a fascinating practice: fencing and magic test in mysterious dungeons. Everyone has to unite in the three. This will not only allow team interaction, but will also be a great opportunity to practice working together. That is why the formation of groups of 3 is the best option. This caused a great excitement for Hadar. He wondered what really lies behind these mysterious groups. What to do now? The Hadar, who spent his childhood among ancient dragons in mountain altitudes, was not known in common affairs, and did not imagine how collective classes were arranged. Hadar engulfed real panic, because he had very little friends, only Jasmine and Cecilia. There was a fervent desire to call Jan, but the fear of hearing the refusal restrained him. And how did they decide to form a 3? He should talk to someone. It is hardly harder than the entrance exam itself. It was at this moment that Jan suddenly approached him, hugged him firmly and said calmly that Hadara was caught. The news was so unexpected that Hadar froze in place, surprised by the unusual tenderness of the touch. He looked around and saw Jan. It immediately brought him relief. Jan lightly patted him on his shoulder, jokingly saying that his ways to memorize really unusual. Finally, he added, "In short, they should act together." The Hadar was angry with tears and did not hide sincere emotions, repeating that he was overwhelming happiness. Such unexpected openness was a lot of struck, and he could not resist. What exactly touched Hadar so much? What happened? Hadar confessed that he was endlessly happy because of the invitation received. Yang wondered if it was so touching that it brought to tears. He understood everything, so he reassured, "Do not cry." In his head he carefully matured the idea, to invite Jasmine or Cecilia. He convinced himself, there is only one satellite, this is quite enough. But suddenly a familiar voice has already been in the air. It was a Jasmine who seems to be comforted. She was almost addressed by several students with proposals to join their team. One young man strongly emphasized that they should work together in the first group. The other, on the contrary, suggested that you unite, assuring that it would not interfere with her and will not distract from business. The period did not want to ignite the quarrels, so she made a compromise. They can stay together for 3, so that there were no disputes between them. The boys immediately appealed to the boys. One even pleased the opportunity to work with the other. However, when evaluating the situation in general, he realized that everything went wrong as it should be. But it was then that the boys laid the dispute again. One emphasized that he also exclaimed, to which the other immediately replied, "They did it almost at the same time, so there is no difference." Jasmine tiredly asked them not to quarrel. John only sighed hard, casting his gaze into her direction. She supposedly enjoys attention. Hadar added with a smile that Jasmine was always like that. However, he soon began to search for Cecilia, and quickly came across her trail. Their eyes crossed for a moment, and the girl immediately looked away. However, Gimaler did not interpret her gesture. This situation again forced the boy to worry. He decided to turn to a friend for help, looking for a way out. Thoughts did not rest. After the internship, it seemed that it began to be removed. John was only indifferent to his shoulders and hurried to reassure him. They say to worry about anything, he is always nearby. In response, Adar asked what he was talking about. What? Instead of brains, only muscles? Or how to understand it? John noted that such words are too sharp. However, for Gedar, who spent childhood among ancient mountain dragons, such expressions did not seem offensive. Yang, with a tired sigh, promised that he would inevitably seek the right person. Hadar, a little uncertain, asked if it was true. Suddenly, Cecilia approached the company and noted that she was aware of their lack of one participant. She wondered whether they deny them if she was also in their team. Audrey barely held back the delight, deciding that this is the case when reverse psychology works. Her face radiated such complacence that it was hard not to notice. When everyone took their place, they returned to the mentor. The woman noted that everyone had already dispersed, and when they gathered together, they went to the dungeon. The left side of the Zelgius Academy was separated from the outside world by a wild, impregnable forest, which seemed to have not yet set the human foot. It was through this forest that they finally got into the entrance to the dungeon. John looked carefully at the surrounding area, and noted with surprise for himself. It was hard to believe that such majestic ruins could be hidden so close to school. All the students froze on the threshold, holding their breath and waiting for the beginning of the dungeon. Hadar was extremely impressed, and noted that such a level could only be expected from the leading academy of the Kingdom of Zelgius. The woman reported that they would start with those groups that are ready to move on. Among the attendees was a teacher named Lux, a master of fencing. He picked up the conversation, promising to acquaint everyone with the features of the dungeon. The dungeon is divided into several levels, but the researchers are allowed to descend only to the 10th floor. Undoubtedly, in these depths, the power of a variety of monsters will t. Those who have already overcome entrance tests to school will effortlessly solve this task, but should not be relaxed. He persistently advises them not to waste time and take up work immediately. Then the teacher turned to their team and reported that only Hadar was a true participant. She called him closer. Gedar went to his mentors without delay. Meanwhile, the girl, obviously not too surprised, noted, "In her opinion, it is clear here, but Gadaru is strictly forbidden." Such words stunned him, so he asked, why? Sweet recalled to him whether he had erased from his memory the same failure in the fencing exam when his sword broke with a crack. Hadar replied that such cases are rarity. Then the woman shrugged and added that if he joins them, he would have to fight at once in 3. Such a conclusion was a lot of upset by Hadar, and he thought it was quite dishonest. The woman suggested the only possible solution: to set clear restrictions. He will only be allowed to develop a strategy, give advice, and find a rival, but no more. If you want to cross these boundaries, their entire team is disqualified. Yang, with Cecilia in one voice, agreed that they had nothing. But suddenly Gedar expressed the opposite opinion, saying that he denied. The Varnish noted that even arranged rules have exceptions. If the situation becomes threatening to all, they can be broken to avoid injuries. Jan supported this position, and Cecilia was eager to join, explaining that all this was done for the sake of the score. Gedar, having frozen in place, watched the conversation with surprise, feeling as if they were not noticed at all. Despite the fact that they coped with this excellent, Cecilia expressed the idea of negotiating the roles in advance, even before you go to explore the dungeon. Yan immediately agreed, stressing that such a proposal was really very appropriate. The girl frankly confessed that she liked to stay in the rearguard. John, with a smile, commented that it is quite logical, because he always goes ahead. After that, Hadar announced to go for intelligence of enemies. Smiling, he added with a touch of irony, which, after all, he did not have a special choice. But suddenly I was settled, and I decided to ask the teachers, will we restrict them, leaving only one role? The woman supported my opinion, emphasizing that it was really the case. It would be unfair to deprive them of their ability to reveal themselves from different sides. Then the luxury put forward a new proposal. How to give them weapons that suits everyone as best you can. The woman immediately picked up the idea, calling her different. The mighty Yang will choose a massive combat hammer, which is marked by incredible devastating force. Instead, Cecilia, not yet achieving perfection in fencing sword, prefers the dagger. This weapon seems much more convenient for her. The luxury returned to Hadar and strictly ordered him to create these things. Of course, it required great strength. However, he also warned that the Hadar would refrain from actions. Meanwhile, Hadar has been suspicious. Do not use it as a regular tool for their own purposes. However, his choice was not too wide, so he forged a weapon that is ideal for both of them. John was sincerely pleased with the new acquisition, struck by the skill of work, and even joked that Hadar al-Hami could not hope worse. The hammer came out really wonderful. Hadar did not hide the joy of the fact that his creation was so comforted by John. After that, the young man asked the girl if she liked her new weapon. He asked if it managed to make it well. Cecilia, with enthusiasm, assured that these weapons are a real work of art. It noted not only its perfect performance, but also lightness and convenience in use. Adar noted that daggers are also suitable for throwing, not only for battle. The girl agreed with a smile, noting their true versatility. However, Adar regretted that he was not able to create even more blades. John denied, reassuring, and those who already have would be enough. Hearing this, Adar faded and agreed that then everything was fine. He thought that the next stage would be the recognition of enemies. To do this, you can easily use the magic of detection, but the question remains, how best to convey this information to your partner? When they came to the dungeon, Hadar suddenly gave a brilliant idea. He had no doubt that the plan would work. He then used a small portion of magic, and suddenly before their eyes a huge, striking map unfolded. John wondered, "What is it?" Cecilia specified, "What is the true meaning of this card?" Gadar nodded and added, "Yes, that's right. Before you is a map of this dungeon, where thanks to the magic of light, all the places where the enemies are hidden are clearly marked." Ian and Cecilia could not hide their surprise from what he saw, thinking together, did he really show something extraordinary? Hadar emphasized that it is here that they are now. These are their stairs. The girl noted that even the marking on them looks incredibly expressive. Gadar explained that these huge circles note the places where the enemies are. The form of the mark can determine how powerful the monster is in front of you. If they are wondering how the forces are, that's how everything looks. The triangle is inferior to the usual circle, but the circle is weaker than double. Yang immediately noticed that it was easily realized intuitively. Hadar emphasized that, based on this data during planning, the team is able to act as well and safely as possible. John did not keep doubt, and wondered if it would not be excess, which the girl reported. An enemy triangle was about to be nearby. Jan tensed, preparing for battle when 3 goblins suddenly crossed them. Noticing the enemies, the guy noted with a smile that these goblins were the perfect choice for heating. Ion grabbed a brand new hammer, just pulled out of the mountain, and strongly prepared for the fight. The fire of impatience broke out in his eyes. He was coordinated to try this weapon in a real battle. Cecilia was already standing nearby and confidently promised to keep his back. Being in the heart of a fierce battle, Harad wished them victory, and mentally noted that he also did not rest the desire to join the battle side by side with these warriors. In the end, thanks to Haradamapi, the study happened without any difficulty. John with Cecilia with confidence won anyone who stood on their way, and Gerard was behind, disappointed and depressed. He did not give him the thought. He also sought to prove himself and finally become useful. After all, having passed a few minutes, they were already stepping together with the 10th. Harada again unfolded his map, trying to see what trials were still waiting for them. Jan was surprised that he had no idea. They got so rapidly the deepest level. Even less than 30 minutes passed. Cecilia supported him, noting that Hurd could really expect something like that. Although he did not enter the battle personally, his support was invaluable for the entire team. She cast a clinging gaze towards Harad, and immediately noticed, as if he was breaking him, as during withdrawal syndrome. Ion also looked at a friend with concern. What was happening made a depressing impression. Harad, as if in a trance, whispered to himself all the time that he should destroy the monster. He wanted to feel the power of magic. Looking at the map, he immediately noticed the movement of the enemy. Without delaying, he announced his comrades. The enemy is already on the approach and is located a double ring. John, without a minute, grabbed his weapon and said with passion that it was a great opportunity for battle. This time, they should immediately enter the duel with the enemy. Cecilia, complete determination, briefly and confirmed its readiness for battle. Soon, a whole horde of goblin arose in the path of the detachment, significantly larger than last time. Ion noted that the goblins were now working as a large coordinated group. Herod, although he kept away from events, barely restrained his desire to ride into battle with others, because to stay in the rear was a great trial for him. John noticed one giant among the goblins, who immediately fell into his eye. Cecilia insisted that there was a medium-strength hobgoblin. Yen wondered if he was accidentally a leader of this flock of goblins. At that moment, Garrod had passed admiration on his face. Obviously, a thought was already born in his head. He did not say a word, just moved away from others and created a certain distance. He briefly explained to his comrades. This time the enemy is completely different than all their previous rivals. So now it falls out. His comrades seemed to have nothing against, and even urged him to join them. Such pressure on their part struck Harada. He felt as he loses the soil under his feet, and for a moment lost his usual confidence. However, he soon mastered himself again, because the next moment, a flock of insidious goblins united around. From the former crowd of helpless creatures, which they have already overcome, were only an yoke and a stranger. Throwing a confident gaze, John silently urged to move on. Cecilia in response barely smiled and said a short but decisive, "Yes." Then she used the spell of body strengthening. At the same moment, Jan's body was filled with force. Jan smiled widely, and full of confidence invited them to get closer. Without spending time, he rapidly rushed forward, becoming an offensive with his hammer, which whirlpools the air. However, the young warrior was so fascinated with the defenseless goblins that he did not notice how one of the enemies stood up behind, preparing to strike an insidious blow. Fortunately, Fred noticed a threat in time. It seemed to him that Jan had been trapped. But as soon as he wanted to intervene, he remembered. Their points would be at risk. Nevertheless, Fred was ready to use magic to come to the rescue. Suddenly, Cecilia intervened in the case. She lifted her hand, and her call flew a air shot with a dagger. Goblin could not stand such a blow and flew away. Yan's help was no longer required. Herod was simultaneously stunned and fun. Grasping his companion enthusiastically, he finally became convinced that trusting her is a futile business. She imposed a spell on this sword, intensifying his power and accelerating the movement to use it as a flying projectile. The girl really learns the new very quickly. Subsequently, she briefly described John what happened to make him or her and complete the massacre with Goblin. Having collected the remnants of strength, Ian sincerely thanked the girl for his support, after which, without hesitation of a second, boldly rushed at the giant goblin, squeezing his fighting hammer in his hands. However, this young man seemed not enough, so he waved his weapon again and struck a powerful blow. Goblin flew like a doll and crashed straight into the wall. The whole team did not hide the delight. Finally, they managed to deal with this flock of monsters, so now new horizons were opened before them for further achievements. Harad exhaled with relief, making sure that everyone remained intact. When his gaze slid on the smiling faces of his friends, he felt pride in the case. It seems that she is not only able to charm over him. John finally acknowledged that he was feeling somewhat exhausted, though he tried to hide it. Cecilia also did not hide her fatigue and supported him with words. Instead, Herod was already caught by the opportunity to show his magical abilities. He proposed to cure his comrades instantly. But as soon as he started a speech, he was interrupted and strictly reminded that he could immediately remove the points. Harad was stunned because at the heart of his soul he sought to use his magic a little. However, every time all his attempts were in vain, and while he was suffering from impotence and disappointment, other members of the detachment leaned over the map, deciding what trials were waiting in front. Cecilia was instantly navigated in the situation and announced that a double-minded double circle was located nearby. Soon Herod got rid of and joined the company to understand what happened. The girl said that she had almost no doubt. He should already be somewhere nearby. Herod nodded and confirmed. Yes, it is. Suddenly, Jen noted a shadow ahead and asked interested that it could be. Cecilia immediately tensed, suggested to get closer and look. What came before the eyes of the girls stunned them to the heart. The girl was engulfed by uncontrollable horror. Her body was shaken by fear. She, barely holding on panic in her voice, wondered if it was the same owner of the dungeon. It was a miserable monster, a giant lizard. It is a monster, more than 3 meters long, hid between the shadows of the gap, surprising with its agility and unusual force. Yang was a lot of surprise, suddenly meeting such a terrible monster here. He noticed that on the map this giant was marked in the same way as Hobgoblin. Or maybe everything is different. I explained Cecily that these creatures only appear once every 50 years. Their self-confidence instantly evaporated, and now they could not be moved. The girl was literally stunned by fear, and confessed that he could not cope with them. Even Yang felt as he was panic. He asked embarrassedly that he was doing here because he could not understand anything. Seeing his friends froze in horror, and Harad tensed, thinking that their fright was a serious sign. However, he began to reproach himself, suspecting that he may have missed or greeted something again. Meanwhile, in one of the isolated rooms on the 10th level of the dungeons, the professor passed slowly, carefully controlling the course of events. Having carefully examined the surrounding area, she did not notice any signs of the presence of students, and decided that staying here was no longer sense. So she moved back to the 9th level. She was already preparing to climb to the 9th floor, as she suddenly attracted her gaze. Without hesitation, she stopped and went in that direction. Here, her look attracted something unusual on the floor, and she instantly lifted the find. Considering her closer, the woman found that it was a slices of scales. The unspeakable surprise has swept it. Is it possible? She decided to explore this amazing thing. At the same time, 3 of her students joined their efforts, preparing to repel a giant lizard, which had already demonstrated a clear hostility towards them. Occasionally, after his friends, Garada suddenly noticed how fear was shaking their faces, and this anxiety was immediately passed to him. He looked carefully at the frightened comrades, trying to understand what happened. Did he not make any mistake? Cess still, I have not yet fully met with thoughts. As I said, it's a lizard of abyss. Due to its stunning force, this monster was nicknamed the Catastrophe, which appears every half a century. Now Karat looked alarmed and asked if this creature really was so powerful. Turning into deep reflections, he tried to find a way out of the difficult situation. Why did he have such difficulties with identifying these monsters? Again, he blamed himself. He was suffering from doubts, thinking if he had overdone the magic circle. All is determined by what power to choose for the average. The double circle marked the center of Gavilan at the appropriate level, because it pre-low average. Yang was stunned by fear so much that he rejected any thoughts about their assessment. Its importance seemed to him meager at that moment. He asked in confusion if there was at least something they can do in this difficult situation. Zizia only shook her head. In her opinion, they risked too thoughtfully, and now they have to rely only on Harad. Harad Laden was to intervene immediately, so he felt acutely approaching the danger. He was not abandoned about the guidelines of Master Lux, who always reminded before the descent in the dungeon. If the situation becomes threatening, the rules can be violated. It is allowed to protect everyone from harm. Herod felt responsible for the detection of enemies, but could not understand why they were removed from them. Maybe the way out is still. He remembered the advice of another teacher, who noted that the last chance always remains. In such circumstances, its role will be restricted. They will only plan, issue orders, and search for an enemy. Herod thought what he was able to do when he would bind his hands with such a strict framework, and it was at this moment that the monster did not hesitate to the attack. His gaze was inseparably focused on the garage. The hero suddenly realized to retreat late, and the only way out is to use his true power. He almost rushed to attack this insurance, and in the last second he stopped and decided that he could change something. Perhaps this magic will help him to fulfill his plan. He thought. He turned to the lizard and wondered if she heard his voice. Harad used another of his magical skills, which enabled him to talk to this lizard. But it was much more complicated than ordinary telepathy. Along with the transfer of thoughts, he was able to evoke in her mind the spooky image of a dragon, who brought a frightened creature almost to death. Now the thoughts of the attack have left the lizard. Scared to the depths of her soul, she sat on the earth, humiliated with her. Continuously, one by one, the lizard tilted the head in front of Harad in the gesture of obedience. Yen and Cecilia were stunned in place without hiding surprise. Their mouths in them inadvertently spread. The events that just happened did not fit in their head at all. Herod remained indifferent to the environment, because he knew in advance no deep conversation should be expected. However, he was convinced that the essence of what he said was quite clear. Who would have thought that this skill would agree here in such an unexpected situation? Turning into the maelstrom of his own memories, he remembered the times when he honed his skill with his mother. During one of the classes, Harad asked her, "Does he treat the concept of intimidation of dragons?" The mother argued that it was true truth. It is this magic that allows you to connect with monsters. Thanks to the charming power that allows you to communicate in the language of dragons, you will be able to convey the dragon-like monsters the essence of their hierarchy and ranks in it. Harad was surprised, but honestly acknowledged. He liked to win lightly, using the power of a dragon flash. The mother only sighed heavily and noted that with this approach, he would never reach the pinnacle of force. Then the guy did not resist the question. Why so? Mom taught him that the real power was not to win in the battle, but in the ability to overcome the enemy without entering into the struggle. Then these words were deeply fallen into the soul. He genuinely admired how wise and beautiful they sound. Now, finding himself in this difficult situation, he felt a sincere gratitude for this mother's science, and thought how invaluable was her lesson. Then he again turned to the monster, this time ordered to listen carefully to his words. He emphasized, under no reason, do not dare touch those who appear on this floor. If you suddenly notice a person here, immediately miss him. It is not just a request, but a strict order. The lizard, bouncing and falling into the floor so low that she did not even dare to reduce her head. She promised to comply with his orders in a trembling voice. Herod remained extremely pleased with the result and mentally noted that if suddenly someone else would be on the 10th floor, this order will protect them from possible danger. Then he turned to the lizard once again, praised him for his efforts, and allowed his head. It was only then that the lizard finally came to the pause and looked at them with interest. He noticed children with frightened faces. Despite the danger, they had already rushed to him in the same way. However, having obtained the order, the lizard did not decide on it and rapidly rushed. Herod made his breath easily and admitted. He muttered something uncertainly under his nose, and then just fled. Therefore, it can be argued that their collision with it ended in failure. So it's time to move forward. But unexpectedly his companions stopped him and asked in surprise that the hell took away he had just made. Yang strongly said, "It is impossible to simply silence this incident." Harada tried to quench his emotions, calling everyone to cool a little. However, John, together with Cecilia, insisted that he gave them a clear and convincing explanation of everything that had happened. From the feeling of their pressure, Harada again took a defensive position and felt alertness. It seemed to him that they had driven him into a corner. Meanwhile, their teacher wandered aimlessly with the corridor, causing the audience suspicion that she was just confused with something or all of her just got rid of it. But suddenly, a deadly lizard appeared from the corner. However, she had no right to simply close her eyes to this case, so she firmly said, no. After all, if something happens, it will strike the safety of her pets. In memory, there was a recent case when Griffin was drafted into their class. As a teacher, she had to do her best to prevent such a danger again. It was at this moment that the abyss lizard emerged suddenly, stealing heading from his students. The woman immediately alerted and said that he still appeared. At the same time, even his associates were bullied over the garage. They were crazy about Rage, trying to snatch a motif of his actions. It looked like a terrible, spooky performance on the side. Karat tried to justify himself, they say, just talking to him. However, Cecilia remained skeptical. According to her, he would hardly fled so hurry if it was true. John agreed with her, emphasizing that Hardy's behavior looked extremely suspicious. The abyss lizard bowed her head to the ground, shook everything, and, with a tail, glowing. But when they were talking lively, unfamiliar sounds suddenly sounded behind. All three instantly turned. A familiar lizard appeared in their field of view again. She flew to meet them frantically, as if a real catastrophe was rising behind her back. John, Cecilia, and Garad himself could not get rid of the depressing feeling of fear and anxiety. It seemed to them that he had returned. Garad has thoughtfully bowed his head. What purpose did he appear for the second time? However, the lizard suddenly froze at their feet, bent to the ground. It was then that the teacher's figure appeared, and all three students saw him. Adar was genuinely surprised, and asked who this mysterious teacher really was. It seemed that this woman was not surprised at the amazing behavior of the lizard from the abyss, and immediately, with a slight smile, asked the boy, "Did he think of such a trick, wasn't it?" Hadar tried to explain his actions again, but it did not give anything. He was not even allowed to agree. Jan and Cecilia were lightning on both sides of the lizard without losing her eyes so that she could not slip. Meanwhile, the teacher, trying to reach the truth, conducted an interrogation with Herod, who obediently sat down on her knees as if he had already been serving her punishment. The woman noted that she barely saw him. He immediately rushed. Perhaps his dragon magic scared the baby. Hadar confirmed this guess. He asked if he really trusts him. The woman, in response, cast a almost reproach look at him and said with firm confidence that she undoubtedly believes. Having spread her hands to the sides, she added that, although it has a lot of strength, he still remains the same rebellious young man. Hadar was uncertainly asking what she was in mind, and one more. After casting his gaze on his team, he asked whether it would somehow affect their grades. The woman answered with a slight smile, assuring that it is not necessary to worry about it. The emergence of the abyss of Feezer caught them by surprise. No one could imagine such development. Even the risk of his own life, the Hadar sought to protect both. But contrary to fear, he still asked her to ask, is such courage worthy of praise? In any case, he noted that this situation would in no way affect their evaluations. The woman sighed deeply and emphasized that, nevertheless, they would still have to find a way out of this problem. Hadar was a little confused and asked if she was still in danger. After all, at his disposal, the device has already been completely switched off. But the woman hurried to assure him, her anxiety is not related to his actions. However, as a mentor, he has no right to leave such a dangerous lizard from the abyss. At this point, John and Cecilia, whose voice was anxiety again, turned to the teacher and warned. Something was wrong with this creature. The women, along with Hadar, were struggling, barely holding back tensions. It seems that this lizard finally rejected the order of Dar and cast an angry gaze towards the damned people. Death in this place is not his fate. He is alive at all costs. Although he was ordered otherwise, he ignored the instruction, which led to the unexpected appearance of Goblin, which was lightly attacked by them. Cecilia and Jan did not have time to get rid of the sudden threat, but their mentor, along with Hadar, had time to intervene and save them from a dangerous attack. Having departed at a safe distance from the monster, they were finally able to move the spirit. The woman turned to her students worriedly and asked if she was fine with them. In response, 3 students in one voice hurried to assure her that everything was fine with them. At the same moment, Hadar noticed a wound on his mentor. His gaze stopped on her back, where a considerable cut was visible. Hadar immediately reported it, but the woman only shrugged and reassured him. It is only a small scratch for her. However, they should be prepared for any surprises. Soon, a whole horde of terrifying monsters caused, obviously, the same scaly monster from the abyss. In order to repel the monster's offensive, they had to get back to the back, combining forces against numerous enemies. The voltage in the air reached the peak. John immediately looked around and asked, "How many enemies are actually around?" Cecilia, excitedly, noted that this lizard did not escape, but only pretended. And this is what gathered around him a whole flock of opponents. The lizard boldly looked out of their place. Loudly, with a mockery, she stated that if someone dared to threaten the owner of this level, then all the monsters would immediately rush to him. He looked at Haru, who once skillfully intimidated him, and noted that these tricks had actually acted before. However, now, in the company of these guys, everything will turn differently. However, he assured that he would go away, and no shadows will stand his way. He then turned to his subordinates and gave the command to destroy them. Hearing this order, the monsters instantly rushed on the offensive. Hadar was torn into battle. All his forces were alert, but without the permission of the mentor, he did not dare to act. So, as an obedient student, he asked if this was a really exceptional situation. The woman confidently confirmed that this time it is possible. This Hadar wanted this. He immediately agreed and was ready to show his power. And instantly after that, he resorted to his magic. After this spell has been imposed, the monsters seemed to have froze from surprise and began to move much slower. Hadar noted that the fast magical tricks have a great effect on the weakest creatures. The young man called for the help of the power of his unique magic, known as the Call of the Sky. Once this magic was heard, the monsters immediately frozen in place. Their offensive suddenly stopped, as if they were hypnotic. It seemed that a short rest brought them incredible pleasure. Cecilia looked at these monsters with an unconcealed surprise. Their smiling faces and vivid facial expressions made them doubt the seriousness of the situation. Her alarming anticipation was reflected in the expression of Yan, who was wondering if, at this point, the subject felt a real pleasure from what was happening. That is why his face was illuminated by a wide smile. The woman grabbed her head, mentally surprised. She would not think that he could take the opportunity so brightly and impress her with her boldness. As always, he exceeded all her expectations. The lizard of the abyss could not believe its eyes. What happened was deeply shaking her, because she had already resigned to the inevitable end. He looked at his subordinates with horror, watching how magic struck them. Did not it really happen in your head? Did he manage to wipe more than half of all monsters from the face of the earth? His creatures, as if soulless puppets, did not show any emotions and remained in a state of complete numbness. John blossomed into a sincere smile full of gratitude to a friend. The feeling of confidence returned his strength, and he again squeezed his hammer in his hand, ready to rush into battle. This inspiration was also picked up by Cecilia, who assured everyone that you should not worry about other monsters. They will cope perfectly on their own. But Hadar immediately intervened, saying that the intervention is superfluous. He leaned the harsh look of the monsters, who did not affect his witchcraft, and with apparent confidence suggested that they would probably rush to see the one now. The woman sighed and glared ironically. They say, sometimes he had solid muscles instead of the brain. Hadar missed her words past her ear and turned straight to the lizard, dating her that she was worthless. The lizard froze from shock, unable to grasp what happened around it. Hadar noted that he was able to convene a whole army of monsters around him. However, this did not make any sense. The young man looked at his mentor once more and shared with her. This time he realized something essential for himself. Even with a sincere intention to reach consent, there will always be people who are simply impossible to understand. Despite all the hopelessness, when the circumstances categorically did not contribute to the abyss lizard, he did not think. He decisively announced that it was time for tactical retreat. Undoubtedly, the child could not compete with his agility. But Lizard himself understood perfectly how dangerous this guy became, and no longer dared to join him in a duel. This time, Hadar was not going to allow the monster to escape. Focusing magical energy, he strongly said that this time he would not allow the enemy to slip out of his hands. He then used his spell, which magnified the lightning flash of the dragon. Despite the desperate attempts of the lizard to escape as far as possible, its plan was collapsed. Hadar's magic relentlessly reached the creature and mercilessly destroyed it. The lizard fell sideways and of course would not have any trouble. The young man overwhelmed the pride for his success. He was genuinely pleased with his completion. It was at this moment that he heard someone calling him, and it made him turn. At the same moment, friends rushed to him with hugs, informing with enthusiasm that the mission was successfully fulfilled. Cecilia stressed that he became their rescuer. Yang strongly promised that he could be relied on. In response, Hadar noted that he was glad to have such a turn of events. After that, Hadar and his comrades successfully left the dungeon. He managed to win the highest score for this test, so another hard workout in the dynamic labyrinths of the dungeon was left behind. That evening, Jasmine sat for dinner with her father in the luxurious dining room of a family mansion. She sincerely shared with him what happened in a day. President Wright did not hide astonishment and immediately asked if such events could unfold in a mysterious dungeon. Hadar remained unmoved as always. Jasmine without hesitation supported his father's opinion, agreeing with his assumptions. The girl exhaled heavily and said with a sad smile that something like this was happening to him. However, this time all the monsters in the maze rushed to the side. After all, this practical activity can be safely written to successful ones. President Wright, encouraging her daughter, asked if she had a little pleasure. Jasmine nodded with a smile on her mouth. President Wright thought for a moment, and then noted that, despite everything, he still remains an unsurpassed master in battle. And suddenly he was illuminated by a brilliant thought. The man jumped out of his place, enthusiastically exclaiming, "Here it is!" In his mind, an interesting idea broke out. Jasmine, without having to eat, frozen, puzzled at him. President Wright suggested that he would probably be able to solve this problem. The monster's invasion has posed a serious threat, and the situation balances on the verge of catastrophe. But right now, he can save the whole country, appearing at the most necessary moment. The next morning, even before the lessons, the teacher called Hadar to herself. In her voice, there was a special seriousness. She had an important news for the boy. Hadar, embarrassed and not quite stimulating what they wanted from him, wondered with alertness, or no one came to him the day before him. The woman confirmed my words. I asked if he had recently passed the exam to obtain a license of the national healer. Hadar explained that he did it only for need. If he is not a healer, then there is no need to count on a generous reward, the woman said, explaining why he was chosen. However, when the results were already in his hands, his gaze stopped at one person. She sincerely believes that he will be able to cope with the task, but there is a respectable official among the audience. so the boy should be as polite as possible. Hadar nodded silently, showing consent. And by the way, he is unobtrusively interested. Who he really is, this man. The woman called herself a saint of the kingdom of Zelhius, and introduced herself as Mrs. Elizabeth Rames. At first, Hadar did not understand what he had just been told. Only when the meaning of the heart finally came to him did sharp fear woke up inside. He, in a trembling voice, wondered if it was really a saint. He immediately asked the teacher if she would go with him. She was surprised by this unexpected initiative, so she shook her head. In fact, the mentor intended to accompany the boy, but she was informed in advance that they wanted to see him alone, without outsiders. However, he already has an internship experience, so he has no doubt he will cope well, and it will end the best. Hadar puzzled to the heart, and he insisted that everything was completely different. He was tormented by the question, why she is so ruthless with him lately. The woman, crossing her arms on her chest, categorically discarded his words. However, Hadar remained adamant. He had no doubt about his correctness, and advised her to think seriously about the situation. The woman thought for a moment, and then she wondered if she was the complete opposite. Doesn't this not prove that she trusts him frankly? Hadari's cheeks flooded with a light blush from her words. Did she really believe in him? The woman assured that she would wait for him here, so it is not necessary to waste time. In addition, she became aware that he scored the highest number of points in the exam. The guy in response noted that after all experienced, the feeling of victory will no longer be as exciting as once. And in a moment, heading to the guest room, he stopped on the threshold, uncertainly scraping or going on. He thought whether she really wanted to talk to him alone, or maybe they are dissatisfied with him. Perhaps during the internship, he accidentally made a mistake without even noticing it. Gathering the last crumbs of strength, he knocked quietly on the door. The answer came right away. Come in. Hadar was terribly nervous before this meeting, and dreamed only one thing: to return home faster. Finally, gathering with the spirit, he carefully opened the door and apologized. In the room he noticed a girl who stood for him. Only he crossed the threshold, the girl immediately returned to him. And Hadar, stunned by a surprise, a few moments were fascinated. His gaze was firmly attracted to her. She was so striking in her unearthly beauty. At that moment, she seemed to him a true saint. The girl wondered if Hadar was really standing in front of her. She remembered that she heard about his brilliant achievement. He passed a difficult exam and gained a national license of the healer with the highest score. Hadar, a little worried and confusing to words, confirmed that it really was. The girl warmly and sincerely smiled and immediately confessed that she was pleased to meet him. She said that she was honored here as a holiday, and her name was Elizabeth. She shakes his hand firmly, sincerely demonstrating her joy from a future meeting. Hadar was still worried, but did not hide his own pleasure. Elizabeth told him that during her journey, when she visited the local church, she accidentally heard a fascinating story about him. When his lover got into trouble, he resorted to an extremely powerful healing power without thought. At that time, Hadar sincerely admitted. At that moment, he acted completely selflessly, without even thinking. But now it causes him mixed feelings and sincere embarrassment. He was determined to squeeze the most possible. Elizabeth, with a light smile, noticed that he did not depreciate his own success. There was no point in deceiving her. She saw it through. Hadar turned his gaze on the girl with interest. Lisbeth confidently grabbed him by her hand and sincerely confessed that she had long dreamed of seeing him. Hadar, noticing their fingers again thought, this time she also became the first to reach the warmth of his palm. Elizabeth wondered whether he would share with her a secret that can instantly apply absolute treatment. Hadar was surprised and asked if she really believed that he should master the sacred magic of healing. Elizabeth only nodded silently, finally confirming her seriousness. Hadar did not stay and confessed. He was awkward because she held him by his hand. He is convinced that his cheeks are already blazing. Hearing this, Elizabeth was confused and immediately hurried to pick up her hand. Having apologized, she acknowledged that, of course, she could not master such powerful magic. Whatever she does not make efforts, she takes almost an hour every time, and even then the chance of success is barely a third. When she finally managed to master it, she spent the next day to restore strength. Hadar emphasized that what she had done was a truly difficult test. Elizabeth fell to his knees in front of him, leaning his forehead to the floor. She sincerely explained, for this reason, she appealed not just to him, but with plea. Hadar was confused and felt extremely embarrassed in such a delicate situation. He was passed by the thought. At first her hands, and now that. What happens next? He could not refuse Elizabeth and eventually agreed. At the same time, he was gently asked to raise her head. Elizabeth wondered if it was true. Express him with sincere gratitude. Hadar noted that it was probably what she wanted to talk alone. After that, the young man moved to the substance without hesitation, announcing that he would now demonstrate it, and advised not to look out of his eyes. Elizabeth glowed with joy and immediately assured that she would keep a close eye on everything, thanking him again. She cast her gaze on the floor where the circle was already drawn, and explained that it was a magical sign. The guy called on his most powerful healing, magic, known as absolute recovery. Promising the spell, he glanced at Elizabeth for a short moment and saw a genuine admiration in her glance. The girl proclaimed with all confidence, "It is an undeniable healing." She had no idea that his action would be so instant. For many years, she has been proud of the title of the strongest healer in the country, and seemed to have greatly overestimated her strength. She still has to grasp a lot of knowledge. Hadar, in turn, tried to convince her that she was too dramatized. Elizabeth noted that even after all this magic in her heart, there was a strange but pleasant sense of pleasure. Hadar wondered if she wanted to repeat it right now. Elizabeth quickly took her hands and returned to the usual calm tone. She gently apologized for her unexpected reaction, admitting that excessive excitement made her lose self-control. Her interlocutor looked at her carefully, with a hidden delight, noting what sincerity and charm she was full of. Elizabeth gathered with the spirit, was determined and solemnly announced her intention to start. After that, she decided to take advantage of the same healing spells that Herod had just imposed. The young man looked closely at the magical circles that suddenly arose before him, and finally realized the essence of the case. It seemed to him the truth. Some important element here is absent. He immediately realized what she had difficulty, and reassured her, asking not to worry. Elizabeth did not hide her astonishment, astonishing in surprise why everything was unfolding so rapidly. His unusual talents continued to impress the girl, causing her admiration. Herod, without responding to her passionate words, rapidly moved to business, and noted that it should be started with the interpretation of the magical circle. Elizabeth smiled, adjusting to listen carefully, and said she was ready to focus on his explanations. Herod struck her with a manifestation of his magical power. Several magical circles broke out before Elizabeth. He explained that the core is just two main elements. She seeks to master the ability to direct magic, known as magical control. When magical energy begins to come to start, a phenomenon, which is called magical activation, begins. For her, she does not feel any difficulty in controlling magic. Everything is surprisingly and quickly. However, it is only necessary to move to direct activation as its pace is significantly slowed. Elizabeth silently listened to his reasoning and, without interrupting, confirmed that this problem is now being discussed. Thinking for a short time, she suggested that if she manages to accelerate the activation of her magic, then a powerful spell will be able to her, isn't it? Gerota noted that she correctly caught his opinion, and smiling, confirmed that theoretically, it was quite possible. However, in order to accelerate the activation of magic, it is important not only to increase the volume of magical energy, but also to significantly increase its output power. Otherwise, there are simply no alternative ways. Having thought, Elizabeth realized, there is no other way out. She not succeed. This awareness hurt her and immersed in sadness. The girl confessed that it was because of this that she apologized to him for treating a rather senseless advice. Harad was captivated by an awkward feeling. It is unpleasant that his actions made her think about herself. So he decided to explain everything, and put dots over and. "Why are you doing so?" "You should not apologize," Harad said, trying to support the girl. "If it makes sufficient effort, their magic reserve can grow significantly." However, it seems that Elizabeth had already made her own decision. She did not allow him to agree, confidently stating that she was clearly clear. She realized that it took more than one day. At the same time, it came to her how much effort he made to get such a result. His ability to find a way out of the situation is really impressive. It is a wonderful testimony of his skill. She was convinced that everything was obvious to him from the beginning. His incredible talents, almost brilliant abilities in everything, were simply amazed. Against this background, the girl was enveloped by a wave of uncertainty and depressing helplessness. She bowed her head again, apologizing for her sharpness. Her interlocutor was silent, not having an idea of how to support her at this moment. And yet, despite confusion, his desire to help her only intensified. He looked at the girl, plunging into thought. How many difficulties she overcame to meet him. Will he do the right thing if he just leaves everything as it is without dare to solve this problem? Isn't there nothing really that he could do? Suddenly, at this moment, the teacher ran rapidly to the class, apologizing to interrupted their conversation. Hadar from Elizabeth switched their heads to the door. The wonder on the boy's face was written clearly. He immediately asked who was really this difficult and mysterious mentor. The woman was in a hurry to them, and only after taking her breath after a quick gait, hurried to share the alarming news. During the lesson, the cursing lesson would not work. 2 students have come under an extremely strong spell, and now it is impossible to delay every moment of weight of gold. Soon, everyone gathered in the room where the children were. The woman first turned to Mrs. Elizabeth, asking her for help, and then the same words addressed her student. Having looked at the students and quickly assessing their condition, Elizabeth added that she was now clear why she was invited here with Mr. Hadar. This curse has a name, respiratory failure. As it turned out later, because of an unfortunate mistake, they breathed the curse. It struck their lungs without letting them breathe on full breaths. The woman wondered if there was an opportunity to recover. Elizabeth replied that it is not just about treatment, it is complete healing. Then she firmly returned to the boy and made a proposal. Come on, do you take one for one and leave the other? Never delay, now every second by weight of gold. She could not afford to stay away. Obviously, Hadar wanted to tell her something, so the girl asked, "Something happened?" Hadar was surprised to look at her and noted that it is possible to get rid of this curse without extreme and painful methods. Elizabeth did not hide astonishment and wondered whether, in his opinion, even stronger magic could be needed here. Hadar immediately denied. This is the highest form of healing that exists. However, he decided to make sure. What kind of ailment does she intend to overcome? Elizabeth thought and noted that such cases can be counted over 100. Is it necessary to list each one separately? For example, the same immunity disorders from magic. Hadar interrupted her, assured that there is nothing detailed descriptions, at least so far. Feeling that he slipped out of memory some significant moment, he focused and plunged into his memories, seeking to find the lost. Somehow, his mother said that today's conversation would relate to consulting services. She wondered that, in his opinion, the most important thing for a real consultant. Hadar wondered, is honesty and advice, and maybe the ability to solve other people's problems skillfully? Mom smiled, noting that such a quick and insightful answer is quite worthy of her son. How to act if the client lowers his own self-esteem. Determining the true price of yourself is not a simple task. What is the roots of this problem? Often, too passionate about the excitement, people lose sustained the most important. So, giving advice, he must focus on the most important. Suddenly, Hadar realized, to open his eyes to someone, you should first get to the source of his anxiety. He was convinced that the main reason was not in the rapid use of absolute healing. The real essence of the problem is probably in her sincere desire to capture as many people as possible. Somewhere in this is the essence. Elizabeth noticed that no one used absolute healing. It turns out that it means that there is another magic that can save them, isn't it? Hadar confirmed this. Only absolute healing can dispel this curse. The teacher stressed that even the strongest magic of healing does not have such a striking effect. On this, Hadar only nodded, and, slyly smiling, added that that is why he intends to use one trick. Ideal healing covers the whole body, but it is possible to direct therapeutic effect directly on a certain injured area. If you do this, full recovery is guaranteed. Elizabeth nodded confidently, making it clear that everything was clear. She was surprised. It seemed wonderful. However, Hadar suddenly snatched her thoughts, noting that there is still an important nuance. Elizabeth looked at him with interest, waiting for explanations. Herod assured that this remedy is able to cure almost all diseases and even remove the curse. Elizabeth only confirmed his words, agreeing with this statement. This girl dreamed of mastering the art of healing so perfect to be able to save as many people as possible. The parade has already completed the activation of its magical circle and announced that the moment has come to tell in detail how it all works. Elizabeth agreed with living interest and eagerly invited him to continue explanation. Harada explained that this detail is an element of the magical circle. It is here that the power of spell is revealed. In other words, changing it, you can control and adjust the area of magic. It can easily use the perfect healing, isn't it? Elizabeth noted that he apparently struck her. In this country, the name of Elizabeth Romishin is revered as a holiday. The girl looked away and confessed that she could not say exactly, because she never had such experience. Herod, smiling, solemnly announced the beginning of the action. Using his unique magic, he acted skillfully, while Elizabeth performed healing without the slightest flaw. Very little time has passed, and two students gradually began to grasp the situation. The guy got on his feet, feeling something in it. The girl, quickly restoring recent events in memory, confidently assumed that all these were the consequences of the curse. Elizabeth flew to Harad and enthusiastically embraced him, notifying with a radiant smile. Their plan was successful. Harad, who was surprisingly in such a manifestation of feelings, was aware that it is better for her to keep a certain distance. Read up from his words, Elizabeth hurried to justify, they say, sincere joy overwhelmed her heart. The teacher, watching this trembling moment with gentleness, sincerely thanked both for their remarkable support. After leaving the health center, both students were finally ready to start classes. The girl warmly thanked the saint for his support, and the guy turned to Karad. Thanks made her heart. When the students left the hospital, Harada noted that I was genuinely happy because the holidays were able to save them. Elizabeth denied, emphasizing that much of the merit should be given to Harad himself, because his contribution was considerable, so his thanks belonged to him. Moreover, he also passed an exam for receiving a healing license. Hearing this, Harada looked at her with surprise. Elizabeth emphasized that he first seeks to cover the cost of his internship. A total of 1.2 billion will reach the payments. Harad was genuinely surprised and asked if he would really get such a tremendous amount. Elizabeth reported that they planned to raise him to the chief physician and promised to arrange all the necessary papers soon. However, Herod refused, explaining that he could not agree to such a proposal. The teacher emphasized that she did not see anything negative about it. His name is already far abroad. People will treat him as a true baron. Harad was only silent, they say. He didn't need so much. Soon, the carriage stopped at the entrance, which was to take Elizabeth. She returned to her satellites once again and sincerely assured, everything is well. Patients are already waiting for patients in the other part of the city. Rest? Once upon a time, it will take care of it. Her friends thoughtfully looked at. Did their conversation end? Elizabeth then confidently stated that she did not intend to stop in his search for absolute treatment. She firmly believes, one day her efforts are crowned with a triumph, and she will prove to everyone who can become a holy one that will save many people. This is what inspires her to move forward tirelessly. In the end, Herod did not restrain himself and approached her. Carefully taking her hand, he sincerely assured that she would certainly succeed. He is always ready to support her and help it. You just need to turn. Elizabeth thanked him sincerely, magnifying him with a true master of his craft. Herod confessedly confessed that he was somehow embarrassed from this name. It caused him true confusion. But Elizabeth just smiled and assured, he fully deserved such an appeal. She was already sitting in a carriage, saying goodbye and promising to return. Finally, she wished him to protect himself. Herod smiled, waved her after her, and said he would look forward to her return. When the saint left the room, the teacher looked at Hadar carefully, and said that she did not even imagine that he would ever dare to take someone's hand. She sincerely believed that in such a situation, he would just run away and hide somewhere in a cozy corner. However, Hadar did not pay attention to her comments, thinking about whether the teacher always said. In the meantime, she noted, probably all these words fly out of her mouth. Suddenly he heard someone talking to him again. Gadar looked around and saw Jasmine standing nearby. She stated with relief that it was good that he had not had time to leave. The man said in response that he had a lot of work, and had already coped with everything. Jasmine smiled and said that it happens sometimes. And suddenly her voice gained harsh, sharp notes. She wondered with reproach. Who is the beautiful girl with whom he was walking, holding her hands firmly? What is the closeness of them? Hadar was confused and felt anxious. The teacher hastened to assure that there is nothing special between them. Only the connection between the teacher and his student. No more. Jasmine immediately mastered herself and said that everything is under control. Okay then. Will he not allow her to rest for a moment? The girl was ablush with shame, and noticingly noticed that he should talk to him about something really important. The gift looked closely at the girl. His gaze glowed with curiosity. Then both went to the majestic royal capital and strolled through the streets, looked at the friendly cafe. Already they made their order. They settled opposite each other, immersed in the atmosphere of expectations and reflections. I did not look from Jasmine, hesitating whether to talk to him. It seemed to me that it happened. It looked extremely tense and embarrassed, although the reason I could not understand. Jasmine was the first to break silence. She sincerely apologized for an unexpected invitation, and wondered if she had been distracted from important cases. Hadar only shook his head calmly, making it clear that there is nothing to worry about. So he asked with interest, what did she want to talk about? Jasmine pointed out that it was in reality that his father entrusted him with this task, and it is directly related to the company that is engaged in the production of bamboo. Hadar froze for a moment, thinking about whether President Wright was planning to offer him a position. Hadar could not put up with this. Timon carefully put the cup on the table and looked at it focusedly, offering immediately to go to the main. She asked if he was familiar with the place as the Ashugan Peninsula. Hadar wondered with a thoughtful look. This is the Ashtuhansky Peninsula, right? In response, Jasmine smiled mysteriously and said, did he not desert? Subsequently, she leaned into her portfolio and unbuttoned it. She pulled out a card from her things and put firmly on the table in front of him, strictly ordered, look carefully at it. At the very event of the kingdom, Zeljas extends the Ashugan Peninsula. It is the closest to the hot mainland. She seeks to discuss with him the details of the construction of the fortress on this peninsula. It is a complete delegation of security responsibilities. Hadar could not hide the excitement. Even his hands trembled. The feeling of responsibility became unbearably difficult. Suddenly, Jasmine gave him a gentle smile and gently said a few words that reassured him and helped to let go of anxiety. Reflecting a little, he asked with interest, why build a fortress in the middle of such lands? Is war on this continent? Jasmine looked at him closely and wondered, does the continent really have no state at all? Hadar cast a curious look at her and asked, why then did this fortress be? Jasmine replied that the peninsula is constantly the purpose of the attacks of the monster, the formidable creatures arriving from the continent of Inferno. Hearing this, she looked at him with surprise and noted that, as it turns out, there were things that were hidden even from Hadar. He just smiled, and frankly admitted, geography is clearly not his horse. In addition, he was convinced that most of the books of the mother had long lost their relevance. Jasmine did not hide the joy of this news and immediately stated that they would certainly not stop there. Of course, Hadar noted it, and advised her to treat him a little more gentle. Subsequently, Jasmine was completely immersed in the explanation, emphasizing that the continent is deservedly considered the most dangerous place throughout the planet. The reason for this is the constant appearance of a huge number of monsters. The level of threat reaches the scale of the catastrophe. In short, it defeated both the abyssal lizard and the griffin, as well as the creatures, whose strength exceeded even their power. Hadar again cast his gaze on the card spread on the table, and made sure that the distance was indicated correctly. Jasmine noted that for the winged monster to overcome such a distance, a trifle, and that was what she saw the greatest threat. The most horrifying thing that can happen is if they can fix themselves there and start multiplying. Hadar noted that in the event of such events, the kingdom will be threatened with a serious danger. That is why they decided to build a fortress, the best solution in these circumstances. Jasmine supported this idea with admiration, recognizing it absolutely correct. Hadar noted that he would not like to see the kingdom of Zeljas as a depository for terrible monsters. Jasmine strongly supported him, confirming that she shares this opinion. This issue is crucial for the future of the whole people. For this reason, financing from the State Defense Budget article is provided for the implementation of this project. That is why bamboo did not become the leader of the industry, even given the global competition. However, another significant question remains. Since they cannot ensure the proper level of safety for construction workers, it has not yet been started, despite all the efforts and months of waiting. Hadar noted that the emergence of powerful monsters is a frequent and inevitable phenomenon. But can you not invite skilled adventurers or brave knights? Jasmine replied that yes, it is quite possible. The state even provides considerable funds for it, but the masters of their business are really short. They suffer from lack of strength to resist the monsters who inhabit this continent. As Hadar noted, they have to survive in the cruel and ruthless world. However, suddenly he snatched the conversation. a thought that did not bring him joy at all. He noted that he wanted to clarify some of the points, just in case, especially given that she chose this moment to share with him such information. She thinks whether it should be transferred to him all the hassle with construction, which for several months cannot move. Jasmine also blossomed with a smile, and noted that from the beginning it was meant. However, Hadar disagreed. According to her, Jasmine did not say anything like this. She specified, "It is really about the transfer of all safety powers." Jasmine was slightly confused and asked, "Is it really impossible? After all, he could afford it." To which Hadar replied that she is too idealized the situation. Jasmine emphasized that it usually does not make such suggestions to the average adventure seekers. However, he saved her from February Griffin, so she confidently trusts him with this difficult mission. In response, Hadar noted that protecting one person is not the same as responsible for the safety of the whole crowd. Jasmine grabbed his feet and announced that he was annoying her. So now, again offended? Hadar froze, thinking whether she was angry, and even in anger, Jasmine retained his sophistication. He sincerely confessed to her that this proposal seems extremely seductive. However, at heart, he was not left with an alarming thought. What if he fails to overcome those monsters? Later, deep silence reigned. A moment later, Jasmine laughed, asked him, and sincerely confessed. She did not expect that he would be so serious about it. He clearly does not value himself properly. Her father also told her about it. "I apologize, but I am not able to fulfill this request." Jasmine noted that if the attempt fails, you will have to pay a fine. However, if he decides to give up the task, no complications will occur. And if reinforcements are required, they instantly organize the necessary support. So if he is satisfied, why not agree? Hadar watched her with silent attention, thinking that the consent would open his way to a deeper acquaintance with Jasmine. At that moment, he plunged into the maelstrom of memories. In his memory, one of the happy days spent next to his mother has emerged. He approached her, saying warmly. The woman looked at her son in surprise and asked, "Something happened?" Hadar dropped next to her, sighed calmly and said that after joining the academy, if necessary, he would not be able to refer to her for advice. "Is it not?" The mother agreed, smiling with a slight sadness, and acknowledged that he was right. There would be too long distance between them. If she was able to advise him something important, she would say, "All her life consists of many elections. Today's solutions form you as you are now. Your future fate, traits and views. All this is born here and now, at the crossroads of the present choice. But only you were destined to decide whether that step would lead to the most secret dreams." She gently spent her hand on his hair, saying with warmth that she had found him once. And it was this meeting that fills her heart with true happiness. In addition, the woman emphasized that he can achieve everything he wants, because she is her son. Hadar smiled at this and agreed with his mother's words confidently. After that, Hadar assured that everything was fine. He expressed his consent, so he instructed her to pass this news to Mr. Wright. Jasmine glowed with joy and impatiently said she wanted to do it right now. Hadar drew attention to her embarrassment, noting that if she really wants to talk in essence, why so shyly blushes? From these words, the girl's face blossomed even brighter than a blush, and she hastened to justify. She may seem so red only because of the rays of the evening sun, which illuminated her at a special angle. Hadar decided to ask such issues no longer, and easily agreed that such an explanation is quite plausible. The girl realized that she was always waiting for the boys to take the first step and invite her to the meeting, and she never took the initiative. This discovery caused her embarrassment, and easily embarrassed her. After that, she rose from the table and assured that all was well. Departure is planned for the weekend, only 2 days. Since the road will be long, he needs to prepare. In the meantime, she was already going to move. Hadar immediately jumped, eagerly asking if the journey would take so much time. "So, he won't appear in the lessons, do I understand correctly?" Jasmine was strongly picked up that this question could be entrusted to her. She will convince her father in everything. Hadar only wondered if everything would do. 2 days have passed. Now these two were going to the carriage, going to their goal. Hadar sincerely admitted that he had no idea that he could take part in such an important expedition. Jasmine reassured him. She assured that her father had already discussed everything he needed with the director, so he had no cause for experiences. Actually, the main buildings of the Zelga Academy were built by a company that belonged to her father. For Hadar, This seemed absolutely natural, because it could not be different when it comes to the best construction company of the whole kingdom. He asked again if everything would be fine. They have to spend a few days alone with her. Jasmine was again confused by the words heard, but quickly captured and squeezed a smile, saying that everything was well with her. This conversation broke. She looked at him once again and finally confessed. In fact, she was extremely happy. Hadar sighed with apparent relief and said that she was happy to finally take a break from an academic routine. She also needed a rest. Jasmine, however, remained dissatisfied, thinking that he still understood anything. Despite all the circumstances, Hadar sincerely admitted that it would be extremely rejoicing in her presence and counting on her help. Jasmine, in response, assured that he can always rely on her as his conductor. She decided it was too early. There would be a moment ahead when they stay with Herod at the same time. Then she will do her best to look at her. But what is it for the noise? Still, she did not resist, and asked what he did. Hadar shuddered nervously, realizing how straightforward and dangerous this question was. He apologized to her, explaining that he was forced to use the perfect healing from time to time, because he was constantly nauseous at sea. Jasmine was genuinely surprised and asked him not to apologize. He does not have to use his healing forces at all. It is enough to warn if something is unusual. However, he did not resist. He was suddenly very bored in a carriage, so everyone was forced to stop. Jasmine came closer. Her eyes glowed with curiosity, and she wondered if his well-being improved. Hadar replied that the perfect healing really brought a noticeable relief. Jasmine smiled even wider and noticed that she calls him an omniscient. That is how it turns out. Her adventure has sincerely cheerful, but she noted that he was really bored. And it seems incredible, because he is considered omnipotent and omniscient. Hyder looked at her with interest and asked what in general means being all-powerful and omniscient. However, the essence of this has not changed. He is not accustomed to such feelings. It is more likely to spread high in the sky. Jasmine asked him about the airship. Is it? But Hadar denied, explaining that his mother was just able to fly. This answer was quite impressed by Jasmine, and she inadvertently remembered how he saved her once. She finally realized that if you think, she had to see how he was flying. This memory was completely out of her memory. Her strange behavior worried Hadar. He did not restrain himself and wondered if there was any misery with her. Perhaps she was also subdued by a seashore? Jasmine wondered. How miracle did he generally be able to fly? At this time, Hadar noted that he is currently using his flawless ability to heal. Jasmine got up and in passing that it was much faster to move air than any other way. Hadar, agreeing, replied that in his opinion, this method really leaves land transport far behind. Jasmine timidly that she would like to fly with him once again if he did not mind. During this confession, she looked confused and embarrassed. She stood confusedly, taking care of how senseless looks in this scene. So I immediately hurried to give an explanation that he did not have any misconceptions. Now, he does not have to endlessly resort to the perfect cure, so everything will move much faster, right? Hadar has thought a little and acknowledged that there is a logic. His gaze stopped on a carriage. So much effort was invested, even transport was prepared in advance. Will it be properly left unused? After all, these are considerable costs. Jasmine in response only smiled slightly. It did not matter what way they would get to the destination, everything will be fine. She quit his cartoon look at her driver, asking whether everything was going on. He instantly assured, everything is right. However, despite his words, Hadar could not get rid of anxiety and suspected that she did not. He frankly acknowledged that he was not twisted. The flu will undoubtedly ahead of him. He planned in his thoughts, even if he flies together with Jasmine and discuss everything on the road, only then can something be done. Jasmine and no idea had that one day would fly over the clouds with her husband of her heart. This moment seems to her a real miracle, full of magic romance, the incredible turn of the plot. Now she was destined to wander with a face smeared in dirt. While the girl plunged into her own reflections, you did not blink her eye, as a huge dragon escapes near her. The sound of his voice, sweet and soft, like a harp overflow, shed over everything. He reported that everything was going as best as possible. His transfiguration on the giant dragon ended completely. Jasmine was deeply impressed and frankly confessed. It exceeded all its boldest expectations. Taking the shape of the dragon, Hadar gently put a massive paw near Jasmine itself. The girl looked at him with interest, in her eyes a slight confusion. Hadar suggested that Jasmine touch his paw. However, the confused Jasmine did not fully realize what it was, and asked what she should do, and what she was crawling on her hand. Then the girl went up. Each step gave out the inner tension. The body was slightly trembled. Having overcome the fear, she asked Hadar not to swing her. But he, like a stone idol, replied that he did not even think of moving it. Like a lightning flash, the girl immediately overcame the way to the top. Stopping, she wondered. What did this bizarre situation have unfolded around? Hadar advised her to hold on to something like his thorn, so it would be more reliable. Jasmine, covered with excitement, shuddering, barely audibly whispered, "Good." As soon as Jasmine was comfortable, he assured her that they would soon rise into the sky. But when he had already prepared for Zeta, she suddenly detained him, asking her to give her a little more time. Hadar stopped sharply. Jasmina opened to him. Although a lot of questions were born in her soul, in fact only one thing worried her. It will not fall until it flies, is it? Hadar assured that everything works like that. Jasmine remembered that he never gave her a clear answer. Hadar replied that he did not promise anything, so he decided to build a safety barrier. Hearing this, Jasmine wondered if they could fly more slowly and sincerely thanked for their care. What Hadar added with a smile. In this case, he may not have become a dragon. The main thing is that she can withstand. Now they have been flying. Jasmine clung to him firmly without releasing for a moment, and surprised she was waiting for much less acceleration. She advised him to reduce the pace a little. It may be safer. In just 1 hour they managed to get to their destination. Hadar cancelled his magical transformation and again took the appearance of a regular guy. Now they are on the mysterious peninsula of Ashugand. The guy judiciously noted that he should not approach people in the form of a dragon. It could scare them. Jasmine felt bad after a grueling flight. It overcame her nausea. Sitting on the ground, she quietly confirmed the words of Hadar, but suddenly she had taken her. Hadar asked if Jasmine was all well, and immediately undertook to surround her with her care. Feeling this attention, Jasmine thanked him sincerely. Hadar noted that despite all their efforts, the speed of movement remained almost unchanged. Maybe she started to feel the first signs of cosmic malaise? Jasmine only shrugged. According to her, at such a speed, anyone could get sick. She sighed sadly, remembering how it all began with gentle and romantic moments, and ended in the fact that it turned into a real dragon. She could not even imagine that this would happen at all. In her soul was a bitter doubt. Did she become too greedy in her desires? And is she not guilty of everything? Despite the fact that there were only 2 of them, she was so lacking in his worry. She wanted to feel that he was worried about her. At that moment, Hadar reached out to her and asked if she would let him take her palm. Jasmine was a light blush on the cheeks. Hadar noticed that she could at any moment stumble on a branch among the trees. He cannot allow it to happen. As soon as his words sounded, Jasmine immediately grabbed him by his hand and assured that everything was really that way. After that, they moved slowly without releasing each other's hands. Jasmine could not yet grasp the reality of what was happening and thought, did it all really be with her? What really happens here? Was it really a hater? It was she who wondered if they would choose this route, right? Jasmine confirmed with confidence. Soon they both reached the bamboo organization. At the entrance, a friendly girl was already waiting for them. Smiling, she warmly met the guests and announced that they were always happy in the bamboo department. Hadar, glancing around, could not but note how spacious and bright this room is. The girl wondered what could come in handy. Jasmine replied that they were interested in seeing the construction of the fortress, and asked to carry out their surroundings and show the terrain. The girl apologizes and explains that this place is open only to those who are directly involved in the project. She is wondering what they have to do with their company. The views of the audience turn to her, full of suspicions. Every subsequent question sounds more urgent. Therefore, he asked Jasmine that they had to stay in ignorance. She explained to it calmly. Similar. The usual thing. And given that they are on the distant continent, it is not surprising that they have not heard about it. Jasmine returned to the girl, apologizing for not introducing herself. She reported that her name was Jasmine, and she was the only daughter of the Bamboo Corporation. Next to her stands Hadar, who, as she said, will be responsible for their safety. Hadar also smiled warmly and expressed his joy to acquaintance. With the same light smile on her mouth, the girl politely asked them to leave these surroundings. Jasmine stopped in a confusion and shouted in surprise, "What? Why?" The girls confessed that they planned to come only in a week, so the present appearance was even a surprise for them. Jasmine agreed, emphasizing, that's how everything had to be first. However, the indisputable fact remains. They got here impressive quickly, using the air. She sat on Hari's back, just when he turned into a dragon. This scene caused a great confusion with Hadar. He was convinced that she revealed all the details to them, which is why they decided to land at a considerable distance. The girl stared at them and stubbornly insisted, "It's time to go." How many times more will she have to repeat this request? Jasmine thought, does the story repeat again? Hadar confessed that if someone had informed him about his transformation into a dragon and flights in the sky, he would hardly believe these words. Jasmine reacted with a smile. They say, it has long been accustomed to his extraordinary abilities, and in his thoughts he was hesitant. Does he? The reason does not lies in him? Jasmine again approached this girl, passionately convincing her in the sincerity of everything that happened and begging to believe. But the girl calmly denied. No matter what Jasmine would say, Hadar was convinced it was possible to leave everything as it was and to act in the old way. He can turn into a dragon at any moment and solve the situation, but there is simply no place in this close space for such a miracle. Suddenly it was illuminated. Why explain if you can just show? Jasmine looked at him in surprise, as if asking that he thought. Hadar received the papers and solemnly announced that it was a treaty certified by the president's personal seal. Subsequently, accompanied by this girl, the company went to the construction site. Jasmina was genuinely surprised that she had not guessed it before. She noted that the most important thing she managed to see and apologized that she did not reach this thought faster. However, now they were where they needed. They arrived from the peninsula. This is where they are going to erect the fortress. All you have to do is look around, and you immediately notice how wide and spacious this space is. The girl warned that the Knights of Ashgan will soon appear, who will take care of safety. She advised to prepare for a meeting with them. Hadar nodded briefly, showing that he heard and understood everything. It seems that there is only a place for future construction. Jasmine confirmed this. As we can see, according to the plan, nothing has been erected on this site. Hadar assured that he would check everything carefully. Jasmine did not deny, only quietly asked him to be more careful. And suddenly the girl exclaimed in the whole voice, asking, what was it? However, it did not have time to warn it. Just from nowhere, a turtle came out, covered with sharp thorns. Before them was a giant amphibian monster, resembling a turtle. Hadar realized that all of them, not noticing it, stepped on the territory that did not belong to them. Jasmina remained stunned, because the monster was much larger than their home. The girl noted that in addition to everything, the skin of this monster was incredibly strong, like a real armor. What to do now? Here they are just crushed. Jasmine comforted the girl, gently convincing that everything would be good and unnecessary. She turned to Red, wondering if he was ready to come to the rescue. After all, he will be able to defeat this turtle, right? The girl shared from Jasmine, who sincerely believes in the power of Red and puts great hopes on him. However, there was almost no time, because the monster was already rapidly approaching them. Hadar concentrated, feeling the magic of diagnosis awakened in it. He studied this monster closely and realized that her overall magical potential was not too high. Judging by the presence on this island, the creature probably belongs to the local fauna. The shot of the dragon strikes at lightning speed, allowing you to instantly put a point in any battle. Awaiting ahead is unknown. Among the opponents may be the most terrible monsters. So there is only one thing. To fight with the cold mind. To find the vulnerable places of the enemy and use them to the maximum. The shield should remain strong, but there should be no protective armor on the abdomen. After that, he took advantage of his nuclear transformation. It was he who forged Adam's spear and tight that I struck this turtle. Jasmine did not hide his admiration. He did not spend time on the little things, and immediately found the most vulnerable place. Although it was covered by a wave of surprise, the girl noted that most people are not capable of such, although in words it seems easy. Her device showed that in front of them, something like a local look. The girl asked what nonsense he was talking about. In fact, this monster arrived from the continent of the underworld, and is by no means the indigenous inhabitant of these lands. At this point, the air cut a strange sound that flowed from a height. Looking up, they saw the majestic phoenix, and they realized that there was another trinity on stage. The girl warned that the knights were about to appear, and advised to wait a little. But Herod did not consider her words, and again used magic to explore the monsters in more detail. He concluded that according to the results of the magical examination, the fire absorbed 80% of his body. Throwing his gaze on the water, he called on magic and made a sharp spear from it. It was then that the water is his only Achilles' heel. He created a real trident from the water and rolled up with this armored whirlwind on an attack on the monster. All three monsters fell to the ground from one powerful blow. The girl, full of horror, asked with excitement, did it really be able to overthrow all three at a moment? The parade acknowledged that he had hurried a little, and sincerely apologized to the fact that he was not waiting for the knights. The girl noted, if he can handle herself, then there is nothing wrong with the fact that he does not work at all by the rules. The girl noted that they seemed quite independent. No supervision was needed. With such confidence, they could go anywhere. In the meantime, she, with her young companion, moves back to the building in order to get the case. He nodded at this and said he understood. It was only me. I came to him and sincerely wished it. And he took a deep breath and said confidently that he was fully trusting. Later, everyone plunged into their usual classes. Hadar, not looking away from the peninsula, noted that since then, no new monster has never appeared. He was gradually covered by boredom. If those two monsters were indeed the strongest on this continent, then perhaps all other creatures will be much weaker than it expected. In addition, their moving is most likely the result of a lost battle for the territory, so even more powerful creatures are likely to be found on the mainland. Given that he has freedom of action, he will certainly take advantage of this opportunity. Then he turned on the dragon again. Jasmine, along with that girl, has already returned. The girl wondered if the ARC and Fly were able to fly. Jasmine confirmed that it was a pure truth. She just arrived on his back. The girl did not restrain the delight, they say. It seems something incredible. Jasmine just smiled, agreeing. That's really. Meanwhile, Hadar has already reached the Inferno Island. He frankly admitted that he did not even try to hide his presence during the flight, so now he was here. However, he did not notice any monsters. It seemed suspicious to him, because in half an hour he carefully examined all the surroundings. Without losing vigilance, he opened the card again to verify. He noticed a large number of monsters on the map, which surprised him and made him think, did he slide something significant? In the shade nearby, a mythical Pegasus was observed, creating exceptional intelligence and incredible power, capable of erasing the city of medium size from the face of the earth. One of the Pegasov, referring to his brother, remembered the dragon with extraordinary power and skill in battle, and with an ironic smile noted that he only neglected such a threat. In response, another Pegas noted that this is not surprising, because a clash with such an enemy is a deadly risk that can cut off life at any moment. Then, one of the Pegasus solemnly said, if no one wants to seek death, then let everyone follow them. The frightened monsters immediately trembled with fear. Hadar looked around confusedly, asking himself what step to do next. However, he did not want another way. You do not want to, but you have to go back. But he was reminded of the mother's guidelines, who always urged not to waste time, to move forward and never stop there. Hadar focused and acknowledged. Everything is, many have not yet had time to find salvation. Without spending time, he goes to the sky to overcome the monsters who chat around. He soon reached the right point and suggested that they could be here. In fact, one creature was particularly impressed among all monsters, the monkey demon. It was distinguished by extraordinary physical strength and incredible cruelty, but did not shine a special mind. Her wild aggression did not know the limits. Taking advantage of his diagnostic skill, Hadar has made sure that no vulnerable point was found. So, he is waiting for a real test of strength. He soon released a devastating draconian blow, which directed all his power simply in a monster, hitting him at a striking speed. The island remained unharmed, and the crazy monster rapidly rushed to him like a lightning. Hadar sighed heavily, and noted that he could not end him with one blow. It impresses that the enemy has not rushed. If he gets his own, it can cause serious problems. However, Hadar was convinced that he would not be able to approach him. Subsequently, he struck the enemy with a rapid blow, similar to the flame of the dragon. This blow made a great impression on the monster. Qatar came closer, and with enthusiasm said that he could not imagine, as he endured 50 balls in a row. What else to expect from a real beast from the continent Inferno? He needs to find a really effective approach to interacting with them. The next time, you will have to think about everything to the smallest detail. And it was at this moment that they suddenly turned. Hadar turned sharply and saw behind the back of a dragon, very similar to the previous one. The newcomer greeted him welcome and sincerely, gladly saying that I was glad. Gadar asked, "That is, after a giant monkey, a giant dragon appeared here." However, he did not feel any threat. The Draka delicately bowed her head, sincerely apologized, and assured the hero that no danger to him. She watched his duel and now seeks to ask him about something important. She would be pleased if someone treated her as a real member of her people, and heard sincerely. Finally, she opens her heart and with genuine hope asks him to become her mentor. Hadar was already surprised and asked, "Is this really a student?" She still agreed. Hadar wondered what was the matter. The girl confessed that she really looked unnoticed from the dark. She was engulfed in a lot of perturbation. He defeated the great Satan without getting even the slightest scratch. She bows deeply before him, asking the permission to call him a brother if he has nothing. Hadar, stunned and confused, believed that she should stay at a distance and not get closer to him so quickly. He confessed to her that although extremely grateful for everything, he would not be able to become a brother for her. The girl wondered the reason for his refusal. After that, the Hadar became human. At first, the girl looked around, without realizing what had happened, and thought that Hadar was just disappearing somewhere. She went to look for him with her eyes and asked where he disappeared. Then Hadar explained with a smile that he now appeared from below. The girl was genuinely surprised, and without resisting she asked who he really was. The gift answered only a light nod, recognizing the truth. He sincerely confessed that he was able to turn a dragon for a while. It became clear immediately. She is not even going to become a human student. And the girl confirmed it without hesitation. Nevertheless, she persistently wants to become his student. To the surprise of Hadar, he asked the reason for this desire. The girl confessed that she heard about his unique gift to turn on the dragon, and it was this incredible power that captured her imagination. Gadar covered his face with his palms. I am sure that the light flashed before him. And it really turned out to be the case. The girl also took a human form, and told that he could become a person when she wants. She introduced herself as Françoise and warmly greeted him, rejoicing in a new acquaintance. Kadar was fascinated by her unspeakable beauty, and did not resist the conversation. It seemed to him that the girl was able to acquire human features. At that moment he was illuminated by an interesting thought, so he wondered if she was a girl. With her voice, in which the drilling hostel was swollen, it was not easy to reach such a conclusion. François asked in surprise, did he really think she was a guy? In fact, there was almost no one left among the brothers, so she tried anything to stay away from the quarrel. Their life here was incredibly difficult. Perhaps this strict reality prompted her to become a student of Hadar. Isn't it? Perfectly. Suddenly, he turned into a dragon again. François, without hiding anxiety, wondered, does he really intend to leave them? Hadar persistently demanded that she immediately turn the dragon. François cast a shrewd look at him and carefully wondered if she would agree to join him. The girl glowed with happiness, having received such an unexpected opportunity. Soon they got back to their base. Hadar escorted Françoise to her room and reported that from now on this place would become her new home. The girl looked around and noted that there was a real human bed here. From such a find, she was genuinely admirable. Hadar emphasized that his room is nearby, so in the case of any difficulty you can contact him without hesitation at any time. His door is always open. François thanked him for such care. Although she tried to hide her excitement, Hadar immediately caught her anxious mood. In her look, he recognized his own feelings in the first days when he left the mountains. Thinking a little, he suggested François, if she does not deny, take a short break and eat. She moved to this idea without hesitation. So, they entered the living room, where they were already waiting for a generously setting table. The girl was delighted. She was amazed that people were so amazing and delicious. Gadar confirmed that yes, indeed 3 times a day, and added a request not to adjust it. François wondered if this should happen at this frequency. She is so eating envy to them that she does not want to think about returning. Gadar wondered if she felt relief now, wasn't it? François did not fully sharpen what she was talking about, so only she watched him silently. The guy noted that earlier on her face, a shadow of anxiety flashed on her face. He was already mentioned by his mother. The mother told him that if he really wanted to get closer, it is best to invite this person for a joint lunch. It is at the table that people become more close, because food unites hearts. Hadar noted that the dish was delicious, and the atmosphere reigned around. This could have a real understanding between them, and the dialogue had every chance of becoming easy and sincere. Francois sincerely thanked for his attention, emphasizing that, as it should be expected, she finally lost her head from him, and, jokingly, again, called him her brother. The girl wondered if she could ask him once they had touched on this topic. If he has the opportunity, would he disagree he teach her? Hadar nodded silently, making it clear that he completely agreed with such a decision. Francois was already glowing with joy, and asked if it was true. Hadar confirmed, yes, everything. She really asked for him, although it is possible, she had already forgotten about her words. Hadar himself believed that there was no such close proximity between them. Francois felt some stiffness and wondered whether she was concerned about this attitude, because he had already taken care of food and housing for her. However, the guy just smiled and reassured her. They say, he offered her help, so there is nothing to worry about. However, he should ask her to ask her. Francois smiled, certain that she would agree to any of his praise. But Hadar noted that he did not speak the words about it. He was going to seek security. But the girl interrupted him again, instantly agreeing. Hadar just smiled, thinking that she had to listen to him to the end. He explained that their task was to achieve the continent Inferno. However, most he wants to overcome the monsters and not let them get from her mainland to him. The girl immediately noted that this is the main threat. Hadar felt relieved. Finally, she listened to him to the very end. Francois wondered if he would cope with it on its own. What to use this at all? Hadar confirmed that this is true. He should appear how the monster is in a hurry to disappear from sight. Francois did not deny, because she was well aware of how much his power was inspiring. Hadar confessed that he did not like his daily battles. Much more he wants to explore how monsters behave and would like to devote his time. Francois wondered, do he really interesting such things? Why is it all Hadar? She thought that somewhere in the world could live other creatures, similar to her, which she could make. He never thought of destroying such creatures. Francois emphasized that it is an act of great nobility on his part. The girl confidently assured him that he could safely trust her. Now that this macaca is no longer in the way to them, it will give any difficulty on its own. Hadar thanked her, noting that to watch the monsters in the air and in the water, it is far from easy. In response, Francois gently hugged him, sincerely confessing in her love. Hadar, not holding back, joked that she was too close. It was at this moment that Jasmine appeared, and this sweet scene disappointed her. She wondered if she did not prevent us from her arrival. The gift only with a smile assured that everything is fine, and when I looked in her side, my heart was filled with genuine joy. Jasmine stood in front of me. Jasmine smiled and noted that the case was made brilliant. Despite this, in her look there was a shadow of anxiety, so she immediately asked what had happened. She was certain that she had been excommunicated for a moment, and in the meantime some girl had already spinned next to him. Hadar was concerned about whether she was well, and suggested that he use medical magic. Jasmine hurried to assure him that everything was fine and worried, and then asked who was and a stranger. It looks like a good relationship between them. Are they really together? On this, Hadar only denied a smile. Of course, no. Jasmine looked closely at a stranger, curious and curious. Are she real, her horns? Then Hadar, leaning to Jasmine very close, whispers in her ear. It is a dragon that can become a human likeness with the help of magic. Something in this spirit. Jasmine only nodded. Now everything was put into place. She wondered his relationship with that mysterious beauty. Hadar asked with a smile. He asked if she was not striking that this girl is actually a dragon. Jasmine immediately recognized in this figure of the one who was able to rotate on the dragon, and could not understand what his image was different. Hadar, noticing her confusion, asked, "What should it mean? Have any changes happened through him?" By that time, Francoise has already decided everything for herself. She came to Jasmine with an unexpected question. Would she not want to meet her brother? Jasmine was blossomed and, confused, said, "Was it really about a girl?" Hadar watched this scene with unconcealed curiosity, not understanding why Jasmine was so excited. Francoise named her name and reported that she would now study here as a student in exchange. She politely apologized for getting acquainted with everyone so late. Jasmine, interested, asked to explain what precisely the status of the student on exchange. Gadar shared that after her journey to the continent, she witnessed his duel and asked to become her mentor. Francois stressed that he had taken her with him. Jasmine immediately reminded that such actions were contrary to the rules. Francois stretched his hands, trying to pull her, at the same time noting that her request is too big. He gently reproached Jasmine, saying that such harsh words should not be said. However, Jasmine retreated sharply, warning, her horns sharp, so it is better to let her go quietly. Francois silently went away, barely audible. She still needs a little rest, and she sincerely hopes that she will be forgiven for excessive emotionality. Jasmine gently reassured her, assuring that everything was fine. After all, Francois has just arrived here today and is quite tired. Franz and I said goodbye to them, sincerely wished the happy road. Meanwhile, Hadar and Jasmine wished her a good night. After that, Hadar explained to her that not only criminals live on the continent, but still should remain alert. Jasmine smiled cunningly and agreed, adding that she was a good and sweet girl. But after all, she sincerely rejoices that her first impression was false. They cast a wary look and asked if she had just said something. Jasmine only waved her hand, assuring that it was not significant. Since important events were waiting for them tomorrow, I wished everyone good night. Hearing this, everyone dispersed in their rooms, preparing for a new day. Hadar still couldn't stick the eyelids and eventually stopped at the open window. He was surprised that on this peninsula, the nighttime coolness prevails much more than he imagined. Francois really has something unusual, but he still cannot leave it. Something inside does not allow him. She causes him memories of his mother. After all, it's the same dragon, isn't it? It was at this moment that the door opened, and Francois entered the room. She wondered how long the twilight time took. In response, Hadar raised his eyebrows in response and asked for what reason she turned to him. Francois noted that he was looking tight, as if he had frozen to the place. She advised him to move to the bed immediately. There he would warmly overlook him almost instantly. In addition, Francois sought to communicate with him a little. He understands well. The feeling of comfort and convenience for his feet is first and foremost. Therefore, the servant must warm his shoes with his own body. Hadar recalled that he seemed to have come across a similar one in his mother's book. Francois also sat on the bed and with a smile said, "If her brother gets sick, you can forget about the lessons." Hearing this, Hadar froze, suddenly realizing that she was too close, as always. Francois stressed that the most important duty of students is the care of their mentor. However, Hadar was convinced that even if he made an effort to persuade her to stop, she would hardly obey. He noted that he would not restrict her in actions, but asked to keep a certain distance. Francois said that it seems quite intelligent to her. She will give all her strength to become the most successful among students. Hadar noticed that it was time to go to rest in order to gather strength for tomorrow. Francois enthusiastically agreed with such a proposal. After that, Francoise did not go to herself, but settled next to him in bed. Hadar could not stick the eyelids for a long time, losing himself in guessing. How did they happen that they were together under one blanket? And why are they lying so close to each other? Without holding back, he said that she was coming too close. Francois confidently replied that she would not be retreating from him. Then Hadar wondered with interest, why? Francois confessed that after returning to the continent, it is covered by fear of bedtime. She only needs to close her eyes, as threatening monsters appear around. She no longer remembers when she could afford to sleep in the latter. Today she is finally calm. She lies with a sense of relief in her soul. Her brother became a reliable fortress for her. Both courageous and sincere, he is always close to her. As soon as the Hadar glanced at her chest, his cheeks immediately flashed a hot blush. Francoise gave the word that would be near him. She gently leaned against him again and reminded of this promise. In case of any difficulties, she can always come to him. Hadar confirmed with a slight surprise that the promise was, but he did not imagine how everything would turn. Francois jokingly noted that it should be predicted, however. It was not necessary to rush in words, if not ready to perform them. On this, Hadar noted with a sad smile, words sometimes become his most fierce enemies. Afterwards, he carefully covered her with a blanket, realizing that he could not leave her alone. So he decided to stay close to support and protect it, and suddenly he was settling. She could just surrender to sleep without worrying about anything. But will he be able to master anxiety and find peace in such a restless moment?